The shadows stretched long across the valley as dusk settled over the Blue Ridge Mountains. Rebecca Miller stood at the edge of Fort Westland, her fingers tightening around the worn leather pouch hanging from her neck, the last gift from her Cherokee grandmother. Before her, Captain James Harrington unfolded a tattered map across a wooden table, his voice cutting through the evening air like a knife. "You will guide us through Raven's Pass. You will lead us to the village, and you will do so without alerting them to our presence." It wasn't a request. The soldiers around her checked their rifles, their eyes reflecting nothing but cold determination. Rebecca understood what awaited the people who had taken her in after the fever claimed her parents. The people who were more family to her than the settlers who now called her traitor for living among savages. She knew what compliance meant, and she knew what refusal would cost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The year was 1838, and the Carolina wilderness harbored both beauty and brutality in equal measure. The policy of Indian removal had transformed the landscape into contested ground, with those in power determined to claim every inch of Cherokee territory regardless of the human cost. The mountains themselves seemed to hold their breath, watching the tragedy unfold beneath their ancient peaks. Rebecca Miller had never intended to stand between two worlds. The daughter of settlers who had established a small farm near Oakwood Settlement, she had grown up learning the ways of survival in the unforgiving terrain of the Blue Ridge. Her mother, Margaret, had always maintained cordial relations with the Cherokee, who occasionally traded at their homestead, unlike many who viewed the natives with suspicion and hatred. When the fever swept through Oakwood during Rebecca's 16th year, it left her orphaned and alone. The settlement families, overwhelmed with their own losses and hardships, had little to offer beyond prayers and occasional meals. It was Sarah, Two Rivers, a Cherokee healer who had once been helped by Rebecca's mother, who came to the abandoned Miller farm after hearing of Margaret's death. "Your mother showed kindness when others showed only fear," the older woman had said, her weathered hands gentle as she helped the feverish girl drink a bitter herbal tea. "Our people do not forget such things." For 3 years, Rebecca had lived among the Cherokee of Hidden Valley, learning their language, their customs, their ways of seeing the world. She helped tend the crops, learned to read the forest as easily as others read books, and found a place where grief didn't consume her every waking moment. The villagers never fully accepted her. She remained the white girl to many, but they treated her with respect and allowed her to build a life among them. All that changed when a hunting party spotted soldiers moving through Cherokee territory, documenting the location of villages and water sources. The council knew what this meant: more forced relocations, more death marches west, more children lost to exposure and starvation. They began preparations to move deeper into the mountains, to places the soldiers couldn't easily reach. Rebecca had volunteered to return to Oakwood to listen for information that might help protect the village. Her fair skin and knowledge of settler ways made her less suspicious than others. What she hadn't anticipated was Private Daniel Cooper, recognizing her from before the fever and reporting her presence to Captain Harrington. Capture had been swift and violent, choice non-existent: guide the soldiers to Hidden Valley or be hanged as a traitor to her race. Watch as the village was destroyed or die before the sun set. The weight of those lives pressed against her chest, making each breath an effort as she stood among men who saw her as nothing more than a useful tool. "You leave at first light," Captain Harrington instructed, rolling up his map with practiced precision. "Sergeant Taylor will ensure you don't get any ideas about running." The burly sergeant nodded, his hand resting meaningfully on his pistol. Rebecca was escorted to a small storage shed, its door secured by a heavy padlock. Through cracks in the wooden walls, she watched as campfires were lit and soldiers prepared for the coming mission. 20 men, well armed, against a village of families preparing to flee with only a handful of hunting weapons between them. Sleep evaded her as she sat with her back against the wall, mind racing through impossible scenarios. She could lead the soldiers astray, but for how long before they realized the deception? She could try to run once in the wilderness, but how far would she get before a bullet found her? Despair settled over her like a shroud as she traced the designs on her grandmother's medicine pouch, whispering prayers to spirits she wasn't sure were listening. The scrape of metal against wood jolted her from half-sleep near midnight. The padlock turned silently, and the door opened just enough for a shadow to slip inside. Rebecca scrambled backward, fingers searching for anything that might serve as a weapon. "Be still," a male voice whispered, so quiet it barely disturbed the air. "I come to help." The figure crouched before her, features gradually becoming visible in the dim moonlight, filtering through the wall cracks. A man, perhaps a few years older than her 20 years, with copper skin and eyes that reflected the night. He wore buckskin leggings and a mixture of Cherokee and settler clothing, his black hair pulled back with a leather cord. Most noticeable was the lack of any insignia identifying him as one of the fort's soldiers. "Who are you?" she whispered, not daring to believe in the possibility of help. "I'm called Thomas by some, Running Wolf by others." His English carried the distinctive rhythm of someone who thought first in Cherokee. "I scout for the army when they insist. I listen when they think I cannot understand. I know what they plan for your village." Rebecca's breath caught. "How did you—" "The spirits have many eyes," he said simply. "Your grandmother was known to my people. Sarah Two Rivers speaks of you often." Hope flickered dangerously in her chest. "The soldiers will hang me if I don't lead them to Hidden Valley." Running Wolf's expression remained impassive, but something in his eyes softened. "Then you must lead them." Her hope died as quickly as it had flared. "I won't betray—" "Not to the village," he interrupted. "To where they believe the village waits. I know a path." He reached slowly into a pouch at his waist and withdrew a small bundle of herbs. "Before dawn, rub this on your skin. The guards will sleep deeper than usual. I will be waiting where the creek splits around the 3 boulders, half a mile beyond the fort's boundary." Before she could question further, he was gone, slipping through the door like smoke. The padlock clicked back into place as if never disturbed. Only the small bundle in her palm proved she hadn't dreamed the encounter. Dawn broke with military precision, soldiers assembling in the yard as Rebecca was led from her makeshift prison. She had applied the crushed herbs as instructed, noting how the guards' eyes had seemed unfocused, their movements sluggish as they escorted her to Captain Harrington. "Remember," the captain said as he checked his pistol, "any sign of deception, and this expedition ends with your execution. The village's fate, however, depends entirely on how smoothly you guide us. Cooperate, and we'll be civilized about the relocation." Rebecca nodded, keeping her eyes downcast to hide the defiance she knew would be visible there. She had spent the remaining hours of darkness memorizing the route Running Wolf had hastily sketched in the dirt floor of her prison. A path that would lead not to Hidden Valley, but to a place called Wolf's Den, a series of caves where Cherokee families sometimes sheltered during harsh winters. The expedition moved out as the morning mist still clung to the forest floor. Rebecca led with 2 soldiers flanking her, followed by Captain Harrington and Lieutenant Reed, with the remaining men spread in a loose formation behind. Their boots crushed the undergrowth with careless authority, announcing their presence to any creature with ears to hear. Rebecca moved with deliberate confidence, selecting paths that seemed natural, but would leave clear tracks, just as Running Wolf had instructed. After 2 hours of hiking, they reached the creek with its distinctive 3 boulders. As the soldiers paused to refill canteens, her eyes scanned the surrounding forest. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then a slight movement, fingers extending from behind a massive oak, forming a gesture she recognized from Hidden Valley. "Continue, I follow." The weight on her shoulders lightened fractionally. She was not alone. The day stretched long as she guided the soldiers deeper into unfamiliar territory. Captain Harrington consulted his map with increasing frequency, brow furrowed. "We should have crossed the ridge by now," he finally said, voice sharp with suspicion. "You're taking us in circles. The recent rains have washed out the usual." "And path," Rebecca replied, the lie coming easily to her lips. "This route is longer but safer for a large group." The captain studied her face, looking for deception. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Continue, but my patience wears thin." As afternoon surrendered to evening, the first drops of rain began to fall. Within minutes, it had become a downpour that reduced visibility to mere yards. The soldiers huddled beneath whatever cover they could find, cursing as water ran in rivulets down their necks. "We make camp here," Harrington ordered, gesturing to a... "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." Relatively flat area beneath a rocky overhang. "Double the watch tonight. I don't trust this weather or our guide." As the soldiers struggled to establish a perimeter in the worsening conditions, Rebecca felt a presence materialize beside her. Running Wolf crouched beneath the same dripping pine bough, his voice masked by the drumming of rain on leaves. "You have done well," he murmured. The village was warned. They moved now to winter grounds across the great river. Relief flooded through her, making her knees weak. What happens tomorrow? Harrington grows suspicious. Tomorrow the path becomes more difficult. The rain will wash away trails. Men who do not know the forest become easily confused when the landmarks disappear. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. By midday, the soldiers will be arguing among themselves about direction. By evening, fear will begin to take hold. Rebecca shivered, though not from the cold rain. And then we separate them from their purpose. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw not just calculation, but compassion. No blood need be shed if courage holds. Before she could ask more, he melted back into the rainy darkness. One moment present, the next gone, leaving her to wonder if the Cherokee stories of shapeshifters might hold more truth than settler. Religion acknowledged. The night passed miserably for the soldiers, with rain soaking through their blankets and mud seeping into everything. Dawn revealed exhausted, irritable men grappling with weapons that needed drying and supplies that had suffered in the deluge. Rebecca noted with grim satisfaction how their confident military bearing had begun to erode after just one difficult night in the wilderness. Captain Harrington, however, remained resolute. "We continue as planned," he announced, cutting through the grumbling. "The village can't be more than a day's march from here." They set out into a forest transformed by rain. Streams had become torrents. Familiar paths had disappeared beneath fallen branches and fresh landslides. Rebecca led them up increasingly difficult terrain, following nearly invisible markers that Running Wolf had somehow left for her. A broken branch here, a peculiar arrangement of stones there. By midday, just as predicted, disagreements erupted. Among the officers, Lieutenant Reed, consulting his own map, argued they had veered too far north. Sergeant Taylor insisted they were headed east, not north. Captain Harrington's composure cracked as he overruled both, declaring they would continue following Rebecca's lead. "She knows these mountains," he said, though doubt had crept into his voice. "If she values her life, she'll deliver us to our destination." The afternoon brought them to the foot of a sheer cliff face where the path appeared to vanish entirely. Rebecca paused, feigning confusion as the soldiers bunched behind her. "Well," Harrington demanded, "where now?" As she looked around as if searching for landmarks. The rain must have caused a rock slide, the path used to continue there. She pointed to a jumble of boulders and uprooted trees that effectively blocked any passage. The captain's patience finally snapped. He grabbed her arm, fingers digging painfully into her flesh. "You've been leading us nowhere, playing for time while your savage friends escape." Before she could respond, a blood-curdling cry echoed off the cliff face. Then another and another. The sounds seemed to come from everywhere at once. Above, behind, all around them. The soldiers spun in confusion, rifles raised against an invisible threat. "Cherokee war cries," Lieutenant Reed whispered, face pale beneath his beard. "Captain." Harrington released Rebecca's arm to draw his pistol. "Form a defensive circle. Now!" As the soldiers scrambled to obey, more cries filled the air. Then a shower of arrows struck the ground before them, close enough to demonstrate skill, but deliberately short of causing injury. The message was clear: we could kill you if we wished. "How many do you estimate?" Harrington asked his lieutenant, voice tight with controlled fear. Reed swallowed hard. "From the sounds, 20, maybe 30 warriors." In reality, Rebecca suspected there were no more than 5 or 6. Running Wolf had explained how Cherokee hunters could throw their voices to confuse prey or enemies. The skill had been refined over centuries of warfare with other tribes long before the first. White settlers arrived. "We're surrounded," Sergeant Taylor said, eyes darting between the trees, "outnumbered and in their territory." Captain Harrington's jaw clenched as he weighed impossible options. Fight against an enemy they couldn't see in terrain they didn't know. Retreat through miles of hostile forest with unseen threats at their backs. "Captain," Rebecca said quietly, "let me speak with them. They know me. Perhaps I can negotiate safe passage for your men back to the fort." Suspicion battled with pragmatism in the captain's eyes. Finally, practicality won. "Do it, but understand, if this is a trick, I'll put a bullet in you myself before they take me." Rebecca nodded and stepped away from the protective circle of soldiers. She raised her hands and called out in Cherokee, the syllables flowing from her tongue with practiced ease. "I stand between worlds. I seek to speak with Running Wolf." The forest fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Then, a figure emerged from behind a massive oak, bow lowered but not discarded. Running Wolf approached slowly, his face painted with red and black stripes that made him appear both familiar and terrifyingly alien. "The woman speaks truth," he announced in deliberate, accented English. "She stands between worlds." His eyes scanned the nervous soldiers. "You have entered sacred ground. The spirits are displeased." Captain Harrington stepped forward, maintaining a facade of authority despite his compromised position. "We're on official government business. We have orders to relocate the Cherokee from Hidden Valley to designated territories west of the Mississippi." Running Wolf's expression remained impassive. "Hidden Valley is empty. The people are gone." "Gone?" Harrington's composure slipped. "Gone where?" "Beyond your reach," Running Wolf said simply. "The Great Spirit has hidden them from your eyes." The captain's face flushed with anger. "This is absurd. We have maps. We have—" "Maps made by men who do not know these mountains," Running Wolf interrupted. "The Cherokee have walked these paths since before your grandfathers' grandfathers were born. We do not need maps to disappear." A tense silence fell. Rebecca could see the calculations running behind Captain Harrington's eyes. The humiliation of returning empty-handed versus the very real possibility of ambush and death in these mountains. "I propose an exchange," Running Wolf continued before the captain could speak. "You return to your fort with your men alive. You report that Hidden Valley was abandoned, its people already gone. In return, we allow you safe passage and do not trouble your fort if you do not trouble our hunting grounds. And if I refuse? Running Wolf's gaze didn't waver. Then the mountains will keep your bones, and your commanders will send other men to suffer the same fate. The implication hung in the air. No one would know exactly what had happened to them. No reinforcements would come because no one would know where to look. Their disappearance would become just another mystery of the wilderness. Lieutenant Reed leaned close to the captain, whispering urgently. The other soldiers shifted nervously, eyes scanning the surrounding forest for threats they couldn't see. Finally, Harrington's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. "We accept your terms," he said, each word clearly painful to pronounce. "But the girl comes with us. She's not one of you." Running Wolf turned to Rebecca, his expression softening slightly. "The choice is hers. She walks between worlds. She must decide where she belongs." All eyes turned to Rebecca. The weight of the moment pressed upon her like a physical force. Return to the fort, to the world of her birth. The world that had abandoned her once and would likely do so again, now that her usefulness was ended. Or remain with the Cherokee, always an outsider but accepted for her skills and loyalty. Her hand found the medicine pouch at her neck, fingers tracing the intricate beadwork. "I stay," she said, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "My place is here." Captain Harrington's face hardened. "You choose savagery over civilization, over your own people." Rebecca met his gaze without flinching. "I choose the people who took me in when my own people left me to die of fever. I choose kindness over cruelty. That seems civilization enough for me." The captain turned away in disgust. "Lieutenant, prepare the men to withdraw. We're done here." As the soldiers gathered their equipment, Running Wolf moved to stand beside Rebecca. "The path you have chosen is not easy," he said quietly. "You will always stand between worlds." She watched the soldiers forming into marching order, already rehearsing the story they would tell to save face. "Perhaps that's exactly where I'm needed." Running Wolf's hand brushed against hers, the touch brief but reassuring. "The hidden people will need a voice that speaks both languages in the days to come. The soldiers will return with more men, more weapons, and we'll be ready," Rebecca replied, surprising herself with the inclusiveness of "we." "The mountains have kept your people safe for generations. They'll continue to do so if we're clever and careful." As the soldiers departed under the watchful eyes of hidden Cherokee scouts, Rebecca felt a strange peace settle over her. The path ahead would not be easy. She would forever live with one foot in each world, never fully belonging to either. But in that unique position lay power and purpose. The sun broke through the clouds as she turned toward Wolf's Den, where the temporary council had established itself until the soldiers left Cherokee territory. Running Wolf walked silently beside her, his presence an anchor in her new reality. "Will they accept me?" she asked as they approached the caves. "Truly accept me, not just tolerate me." Running Wolf considered this, his face serious. "They will accept what you bring, knowledge of the soldiers' ways, ability to interpret their words and intentions. In time, as you prove yourself again and again, they will see beyond what you are to who you are." Rebecca nodded, understanding the truth in his words. Trust was earned, not given, especially in times of such peril for his people. As they reached the cave entrance, Sarah Two Rivers emerged, her weathered face breaking into a rare smile at the sight of Rebecca alive and unharmed. "You have walked a dangerous path," the elder woman said, taking Rebecca's hands in her own, "and returned to us stronger." Behind Sarah, other faces appeared, some curious, some wary, some openly welcoming. Children peeked around their parents' legs, elders leaned on staffs, warriors stood with the vigilant posture of those who knew danger had not fully passed. Rebecca felt Running Wolf's presence at her shoulder, steady and reassuring. With this, man who moved between worlds as she did, and these people who had room in their hearts for one who looked different but shared their trials, she had found something she thought lost forever in the fever that claimed her parents. She had found home. The first winter at Wolf's Den tested Rebecca in ways she couldn't have imagined. The cave system provided shelter from the bitter mountain winds, but cold seeped through the stone, chilling bones and spirits alike. Food grew, scarce as game retreated deeper into the forests. The Cherokee had prepared as best they could, but they hadn't anticipated housing an entire village in the caves for months, while soldiers patrolled the valleys below. Rebecca's decision to stay with the tribe, rather than return to Fort Westland, had earned her a measure of respect, but acceptance remained elusive. Many still watched her with guarded eyes, wondering if her loyalty would waver when hardship deepened. Children were less cautious, drawn to her stories of life in the settlement and her willingness to play, despite the gravity of their situation. The elders observed this with quiet approval. Children's intuition often saw truth that adult suspicion missed. Sarah Two Rivers became Rebecca's steadfast advocate, teaching her the deeper aspects of Cherokee medicine and tradition that she hadn't learned during her 3 years in Hidden Valley. "Your hands were made for healing," the elder woman said one evening as they sorted dried herbs by the central fire. "The Great Spirit doesn't concern itself with the color of fingers that tend wounds." Running Wolf came and went like his namesake, appearing without warning and departing just as suddenly. He served as their eyes beyond the caves, tracking military movements and bringing news of other Cherokee bands facing similar persecution. Each time he returned, Rebecca felt a peculiar lightness in her chest, followed by an equally strong worry when he prepared to leave again. "Captain Harrington has been replaced," he informed the council during one of his returns, his face illuminated by firelight as the tribal leaders gathered in the deepest chamber. "A Colonel Thornton has taken command of Fort Westland. He brings a reputation for ruthlessness from the Seminole campaigns in Florida." Chief Joseph, known to his people as Greyhawk, frowned deeply. The firelight accentuated the lines of concern etched into his copper face. "What of the treaty papers we sent with the Quaker missionary? Has there been response?" Running Wolf's expression hardened. "The missionary never reached Philadelphia. His body was found at the bottom of Settlers Ridge. The treaty papers were missing." A heavy silence fell over the gathering. Rebecca felt sick. She'd helped draft those papers, a desperate attempt to secure some protected territory for the tribe by appealing directly to lawmakers in Washington, bypassing the corrupt local Indian agents who profited from Cherokee removal. "Murder," she whispered, the word hanging in the air. Greyhawk raised a hand, bringing focus back to the council. "We cannot assume who is responsible. The mountains hold many dangers." A missionary who carried nothing of value except Cherokee treaty papers. Running Wolf's voice remained controlled, but Rebecca could hear the anger beneath. "This was no accident." The chief nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but accusation without proof brings no justice." His gaze swept the council. "We must decide our path forward. Winter releases its grip soon. We cannot remain in these caves indefinitely." One of the tribal warriors, a broad-shouldered man called Stone Bear, leaned forward. "We should move north, join our brothers near the Ohio territories. The northern routes are heavily patrolled," Running Wolf countered, "and our northern brothers face their own struggles with encroachment." "West, then," offered another council member. "Beyond the great river, where others have already established new settlements." Rebecca listened as various proposals were debated. Each carried its own dangers, its own sacrifices. The forced migration westward, what the settlers were beginning to call the Trail of Tears, had already claimed countless Cherokee lives. Those who had traveled the route reported unimaginable suffering, with elders and children particularly vulnerable to disease, exposure, and starvation. When the discussion circled back to Greyhawk, he turned unexpectedly to Rebecca. "You have been silent, stands between. What do your eyes see?" The use of her Cherokee name, given to her after the confrontation with Captain Harrington, startled her. It was the first time the chief had addressed her directly in council. She gathered her thoughts carefully. "I see a people caught between impossible choices. Moving means certain suffering. Staying means constant hiding." She paused, aware of all eyes upon her. "But I also see opportunity in division." Greyhawk gestured for her to continue. "The settlers are not united in their views of the Cherokee. There are those who oppose removal, missionaries, some traders, even certain government officials who believe the treaties are being violated. If we could establish contact with these allies—" "We tried that with the missionary," Stone Bear interrupted. "Look where it led." Rebecca nodded in acknowledgement. "Yes, which suggests someone intercepted him because they feared what might happen if Cherokee grievances reached sympathetic ears in government." She leaned forward, warming to her point. "That fear can be used. What if we find a way to make our story known more broadly? Not just to officials, but to ordinary people in the eastern cities?" Running Wolf's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "The newspaper in Asheville. The editor has written against removal before." "Exactly," Rebecca said. "If detailed accounts of treaty violations, of families separated, of children dying on forced marches, if these stories reached enough people, public sentiment might force a reconsideration of the removal policy." Stone Bear scoffed. "Words on paper will not stop rifles." "Not immediately," Rebecca conceded, "but they might slow the process, create pressure from the east while we establish safer routes west for those who choose to go." The debate continued. Late into the night, no consensus was reached, but Rebecca's suggestion had planted a seed. By morning, Greyhawk had made his decision. The tribe would divide its strength. Some would begin the careful journey west in small, less noticeable groups, while others would remain in the mountains, maintaining contact with potential allies among the white settlers. Rebecca found herself assigned to work with Running Wolf, Sarah Two Rivers, and a small group tasked with documenting Cherokee grievances and finding ways to communicate them to sympathetic outlets. It was dangerous work that would require moving between two worlds, precisely what she was uniquely positioned to do. The first hints of spring brought both renewed hope and increased peril. As snow melted from the lower passes, military patrols pushed deeper into the mountains. The cave system that had sheltered them through winter now felt like a potential trap. The council decided to split the remaining tribe into smaller family groups, dispersing throughout the mountains to reduce the risk of discovery. Rebecca joined Sarah Two Rivers, Running Wolf, and two families with young children in a journey to an abandoned settler's cabin near Whispering Pine Creek. The location offered strategic advantages, close enough to the main trading road to gather information, far enough from regular patrol routes to provide relative safety. They traveled by night, moving silently through forests where Rebecca had once stumbled with settlers' awkwardness. Now she walked with the quiet assurance of someone who understood the language of the wilderness, which branches would snap underfoot, which game trails offered the surest passage, which shadows might conceal watchful eyes. The cabin appeared, suddenly between the trees, small and neglected but still standing. Built by a trapper who had either moved on or perished, its single room and loft would be cramped for their group, but the thick walls offered shelter and security. More importantly, its appearance as a white settlement might deflect casual observation. "We will need to be cautious with fire," Running Wolf said as they approached the clearing. "Smoke can be seen from a distance." Sarah Two Rivers nodded in agreement. "We will cook before dawn and after dusk, when mist clings to the valley and hides what rises from the chimney." The two families, the swimmers and the blankets, moved efficiently to establish their temporary home. Children were assigned to gather safe greens from the forest edge, while adults inspected the cabin's condition. Rebecca and Running Wolf scouted the perimeter, identifying escape routes and potential hiding places should soldiers appear. They worked side by side with the familiar rhythm of those who had come to anticipate each other's movements. Rebecca noted changes in Running Wolf since their first meeting months ago. The quiet scout had gradually revealed layers beneath his stoic exterior, a dry humor that emerged in unexpected moments, a deep knowledge of traditional stories, a gentleness with children that contrasted with his fierce protection of the tribe. "You're staring," he observed without looking at her, his hands continuing to clear brush from a hidden trail that led away from the cabin. Heat rose in Rebecca's cheeks. "I was thinking, not staring." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Your thoughts have weight, I can feel them." She smiled despite herself. "I was thinking that you're different than when we first met." "As are you." Now he did look at her, his dark eyes reflecting the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. The Rebecca who stood at Fort Westland would not recognize the woman who walks these woods now. The observation struck her with unexpected force. He was right. The frightened young woman, forced to choose between betrayal and death, had transformed into someone stronger, more certain. Her hands bore calluses from work her settler parents never imagined she would do. Her skin had darkened from days in the forest. Even her way of thinking had shifted, incorporating Cherokee concepts of time and relationship that had once seemed foreign. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Helping me that night in the fort? Your life might be simpler if you had left me to my fate." Running Wolf continued working for several moments, his expression unreadable. Finally, he straightened, wiping soil from his hands. The path of least resistance is rarely the path of greatest purpose. He met her gaze directly. "I do not seek a simple life Rebecca stands between. I seek a meaningful one." The use of both her names, Settler and Cherokee together, felt significant, though she couldn't articulate why. Before she could respond, Sarah Two Rivers called them back to the cabin. The old healer had discovered something concerning. Inside, Sarah pointed to marks carved into the underside of a ceiling beam. Fresh marks that couldn't have been made by the cabin's original owner. "Cavalry scout signs," Running Wolf confirmed, examining the notches. "This place has been used as a waypoint." "Recently?" Rebecca asked, alarm rising. He nodded grimly. "Within the past moon cycle, but infrequently. Perhaps they check once, every few weeks." "Then we cannot stay," Mrs. Swimmer said, clutching her youngest child closer. "No," Running Wolf agreed, "but neither must we abandon it immediately and leave evidence of our presence. We use it carefully for no more than 2 days and make it appear untouched when we depart." The discovery cast a shadow over their temporary refuge. Watches were established, with someone always alert for approaching riders. Children were taught to gather their most essential belongings at a moment's notice. Escape routes were rehearsed in whispers. Despite these precautions, their brief stay proved valuable. From the cabin's loft window, they observed supply wagons traveling the distant main road. Rebecca and Running Wolf ventured close enough one evening to overhear traders discussing military movements. A new commander arriving at Fort Westland with additional troops, rumors of Cherokee raids that Rebecca knew were fabricated to justify harsher measures. Most significantly, they learned of a northern Quaker named Elias Pennington, who was asking uncomfortable questions about Cherokee treatment at trading posts throughout the region. Here potentially was the ally they needed. On their second and final night at the cabin, as families slept in tight clusters on the floor, Rebecca and Running Wolf kept watch from the loft. The small window offered a view of the clear night. Sky, stars scattered like Cherokee River's healing herbs across dark fabric. "If we find this Quaker," Rebecca whispered, "I could serve as messenger. I can travel more easily among settlers without raising suspicion." Running Wolf nodded slowly. "It would be dangerous. If Colonel Thornton learns you're alive and helping, Cherokee." "He won't hang me," she said with grim certainty. "He'll use me as bait to find the rest of you, which would be worse than hanging." Running Wolf's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers wrapping around hers. With unexpected gentleness, "I would not lose you to such a fate." The simple declaration hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Rebecca felt her pulse quicken as his thumb traced small circles against her palm. "I'm not easily lost," she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. His smile was visible even in the dim starlight. "No, you are not." They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, hands still joined, before Running Wolf spoke again. "There is something I must tell you, something I have carried since we met." The serious tone made Rebecca turn to study his face. "What is it?" "When I came to you at Fort Westland, it was not by chance." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I had been watching you since you first joined our people 3 summers ago. Not always close, not every day, but I knew of you. I saw how you worked to learn our ways, how you respected our traditions, even when you did not understand them." Rebecca blinked in surprise. "You knew me before the fort. Why did you never speak to me?" "It was not my place." His gaze remained on the stars outside. "I am mixed blood. My father Cherokee, my mother from the Shawnee people to the north. I walked between worlds in my own way. The full-blood families were still deciding if you could be trusted." Now he turned to her, his expression earnest. "But I saw your heart before others did. When I learned of your capture, I knew I must act." The revelation shifted something in Rebecca's understanding of their connection. What she had attributed to chance, or at most, the intervention of Cherokee spirits, had deeper roots in human observation and choice. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me when others couldn't." His hand tightened around hers briefly, before releasing it. "We should wake the others soon. We must move before dawn." The moment passed, but something had changed between them. A boundary crossed, a truth acknowledged. As they prepared to leave the cabin the next morning, carefully, removing all traces of their presence, Rebecca caught Cherokee Rivers, watching them with knowing eyes. The elder woman said nothing, but her slight nod communicated volumes. Their group rejoined other tribal members at a predetermined meeting place deep in the forest. The news they brought of increased military presence, of the possible Quaker, ally of cavalry scouts using the cabin, was received with grave concern by Greyhawk and the council. "This Colonel Thornton moves faster than we anticipated," the chief observed. "The western groups report soldiers establishing new outposts along the mountain passes. They seek to encircle us." "What of our people who have already begun the journey west?" Cherokee Rivers asked. Greyhawk's expression darkened. "Some have reached the territories beyond the Great River. Others—" He did not need to finish. Everyone understood what happened to those caught by soldiers during attempted escape. Stone Bear, who had become increasingly agitated during the council, stood abruptly. "We waste time with talk and clever plans. The soldiers understand only one language." He patted the knife at his belt meaningfully. Violence invites greater violence, Greyhawk cautioned. We are outnumbered, outarmed. So we do nothing, Stone Bear challenged. Hide in the forest until they hunt down the last of us? My brother's family was taken last moon. His children march west without enough food or medicine while we debate. Words on paper and messages to people who do not care. Rebecca understood his anger. Stone Bear had lost more than most to the removal policies, not just his brother's family, but his wife to a soldier's bullet during an earlier raid. His pain demanded action, justice, retribution. There may be a middle path, Running Wolf said quietly. All eyes turned to him. Not passive hiding, not suicidal attacks. Something that forces them to acknowledge us as people, not obstacles. Speak plainly, Greyhawk instructed. Running Wolf glanced at Rebecca before continuing. The Quaker Pennington travels with a writer from a Philadelphia newspaper. They document conditions among displaced tribes. If Rebecca could reach them, share our council's words directly. And meanwhile, Stone Bear demanded, while she carries messages, what of our people being hunted? We become ghosts, Running Wolf said, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. We leave signs the soldiers cannot ignore but cannot explain. We take no lives but make them feel watched. We use their fear of what they do not understand. A murmur ran through the council. Stone Bear looked skeptical but interested. Greyhawk stroked his chin thoughtfully. Psychological warfare, Rebecca said, using an English term before explaining in Cherokee. Battle fought in the mind rather than with weapons. Can such a thing work? Asked an elder. Running Wolf nodded confidently. The settlers tell stories around their fires about Cherokee spirits, about curses and hauntings. They fear what they do not understand about our connection to the land. We use that fear as our shield, while Rebecca and others work to reach those who might help through their laws and papers. The discussion continued into the night, details debated and refined. By morning, a new strategy had emerged, one that combined practical resistance with political outreach. Rebecca would seek out Pennington and his newspaper companion, carrying documented evidence of treaty violations. Meanwhile, Running Wolf would lead a small group in creating a campaign of carefully orchestrated supernatural incidents that would unnerve the soldiers without causing harm. As preparations began, Rebecca found herself both exhilarated and terrified by what lay ahead. She would need to travel through areas controlled by soldiers who knew her face, carrying information that would be considered treasonous. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential impact. The night before her departure, as the camp settled into uneasy sleep, Running Wolf sought her out. He carried a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. For your journey, he said, offering it to her. Rebecca unwrapped the gift carefully. Inside lay a beautifully crafted knife with a bone handle, small enough to conceal yet lethal if needed. Alongside it was a medicine pouch, similar to the one she'd inherited from her grandmother, but new, the beadwork intricate and meaningful. The knife was my father's, Running Wolf explained. The pouch contains herbs for strength and clarity of thought. And this, he pointed to a particular pattern in the beadwork, means protection on difficult journeys. Rebecca ran her finger over the designs, recognizing Sarah Two Rivers' distinctive style. Did she help you make this? He nodded. She said your grandmother would approve. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. I'll return them both to you when I come back, she promised. You will return them in person, he agreed, making it sound more like a sacred oath than a casual statement. I will find you, wherever you are, when your task is complete. How can you be so certain? She asked, thinking of all the dangers that lay ahead for both of them. Running Wolf placed his hand over hers, pressing the gifts between their palms. Because some paths, once joined, cannot be separated. The Great Spirit has woven our journeys together for a purpose greater than either of us alone. Rebecca recognized the echo of Cherokee teaching in his words, the interconnectedness of all things, the purposeful design that transcended individual desire or fear. Yet she also heard something deeper, something personal, that made her heart race. "I will come back," she said firmly, "for the tribe, for our cause, and for you, Thomas Running Wolf." His eyes widened slightly at her use of both his names, his Christian name and his Cherokee one. It was the first time she had addressed him this way, acknowledging the duality they both carried. They stood in silence, hands still joined around. The gifts, neither willing to be the first to break the connection. Around them, the night sounds of the forest created a cocoon of privacy in the midst of the camp. Owls calling, leaves rustling, the distant murmur of the creek that provided their water. Finally, Running Wolf spoke. "There is a belief among my mother's people, the Shawnee. They say that when two people are destined to walk together in this life, their spirits recognize each other from previous journeys." His voice dropped lower. "I'd recognized you. Rebecca stands between. From the first moment at Fort Westland, perhaps even before, my spirit knew yours." The confession stunned her. Such open declaration of feeling was rare among the Cherokee men she had known, who tended to express themselves through action rather than words. She began, then stopped, unsure how to respond to something so profound. Finally, she simply told the truth. "I feel it too. This connection, as if we've known each other through many winters." His free hand rose to touch her cheek gently. "Then we are already bound by something stronger than the challenges ahead. Remember that when the path seems longest." At dawn, Rebecca prepared for her journey. She would travel first to a trading post where Sarah Two Rivers had a contact, a half-Cherokee woman married to one of the traders. From there, she would seek information about Pennington's whereabouts while maintaining the persona of a settler. Woman searching for missing relatives. The council had prepared documentary evidence, affidavits from tribal members, copies of treaty sections being violated, maps showing illegal encroachment on guaranteed Cherokee lands. These precious papers were sewn into the lining of Rebecca's dress, hidden from casual inspection. Sarah Two Rivers embraced her before she left. "Trust your instincts," the elder woman advised. "They will speak before your mind understands danger." She pressed additional herbs into Rebecca's hands, for fever, for pain, for courage when it falters. Greyhawk offered a more formal blessing, acknowledging her mission's importance to the tribe's survival. Even Stone Bear, still skeptical of paper wars, nodded his respect for her courage. Running Wolf would accompany her for the first day's journey, establishing her on the correct path before returning to begin his own mission of strategic disruption. They traveled in comfortable silence through the morning, each absorbed in mental preparation for what lay ahead. At midday, they reached a stream where they would part ways. Rebecca filled her water skin while Running Wolf scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of danger. "The trading post is half a day's walk following this stream downhill," he said. "Mrs. Redbird expects you by nightfall. If you haven't arrived by morning, she will send word." Rebecca nodded, securing the water skin to her belt. She had exchanged her Cherokee clothing for a simple settler's dress and bonnet, the transformation striking. With her hair pulled back severely and dirt strategically smudged on her face to suggest travel hardship, she looked every bit the frontier woman searching for family. "Remember to stumble occasionally," Running Wolf advised with a hint of humor. "White women walk like they're fighting the earth with each step." Rebecca gave him a mock-offended look. "I'll have you know I was quite accomplished at stumbling before I met you." Their shared laughter felt precious, a moment of lightness before they faced their separate dangers. When it faded, the reality of their parting settled around them. "Be careful," she said, suddenly finding it difficult to meet his eyes. Your ghost tricks may frighten the soldiers, but their bullets are still real. As are their prisons, he countered, nodding toward her hidden papers. If they discover what you carry, they won't. She touched the knife concealed in her sleeve. I'll reach Pennington. I'll make sure our story is told. Running Wolf stepped closer, bridging the small distance between them. When this is finished, when our people are safe. He paused, seeming to struggle with words. There are things I would say to you, about future seasons, about paths walked together. Rebecca's breath caught. Among the Cherokee, discussions of shared futures weren't undertaken lightly. Such words were as binding as formal promises. I would hear those things, she whispered. When the time comes. His hand found hers one last time, fingers interlacing with deliberate intent. Until then, I carry you here. He placed their joined hands over his heart. The gesture required no response in words. Rebecca stood on tiptoe and pressed her lips gently to his cheek, conveying what language struggled to express. They parted, without further delay, each turning to their appointed task. Rebecca didn't look back as she followed the stream downhill, forcing herself to adopt the hesitant gait of a settler woman unused to forest travel. She adjusted her bonnet to conceal her face from casual observation and mentally rehearsed her cover story. As the trading post came into view through the trees late that afternoon, Rebecca took a deep breath and stepped fully into her role. She allowed her shoulders to hunch with worry, her steps to falter with exhaustion. To anyone watching, she was simply another victim of frontier hardship, another displaced settler searching for lost connections. No one would guess she carried the future of the Cherokee nation sewn into her clothing. No one would suspect that this seemingly fragile white woman was the vital link in a resistance that would challenge the most powerful army on the continent. No one would imagine that she had found her true identity, her true purpose, and perhaps even her true heart among the people she now fought to protect. Rebecca Miller had vanished. Rebecca Stands, between walked forward into danger, carrying the weight of two worlds on her shoulders. The Redbird trading post emerged from the mist like a mirage, its weathered timber walls and sloping roof a stark reminder of the settler world Rebecca had left behind. Lanterns glowed in the windows despite the early hour, casting warm rectangles of light onto the muddy yard where a few horses stood tethered. Rebecca paused at the tree line, studying the scene. A covered wagon sat near the main entrance, its canvas sides stained from travel. Two men unloaded crates while another smoked a pipe by the door, his rifle leaning casually against the wall, casual yet ready. She adjusted her bonnet, ensuring it shadowed her face, and smudged a bit more dirt onto her cheeks. The dress felt constrictive after months of Cherokee garments, the shoes stiff and uncomfortable. Taking a deep breath, she hunched her shoulders and adopted the weary gait of a woman pushed beyond endurance. It wasn't entirely an act. The weight of her mission pressed down on her with each step toward the trading post. "Evening, ma'am," the smoking man greeted as she approached, his eyes sweeping over her disheveled appearance with mild curiosity. "You're traveling late." Rebecca clutched her shawl tighter, keeping her gaze downcast as a proper settler woman might when addressing a strange man. "Looking for shelter," she murmured. "Was told Mrs. Redbird might have a place for a woman. Alone." The man's expression softened slightly. "Martha's got a kind heart for strays, that's certain." He gestured toward the door. "She'll be inside, minding the counter." The interior of the trading post assaulted Rebecca's senses after so many months in the natural world. The sharp smells of tobacco, coffee, and coal oil mingled with leather and metal. Goods crowded every available space: sacks of flour and sugar, bolts of fabric, iron cookware, tools, weapons, and countless small luxuries that now seemed frivolous to her experienced eyes. How easily she had once taken such abundance for granted. A woman stood behind the rough-hewn counter, tallying figures in a ledger by lamplight. Her light brown hair was streaked with grey and pulled back severely, but her face, when she looked up, held a quiet strength that reminded Rebecca of Sarah Two Rivers, despite their different colouring. This would be Martha Redbird, half Cherokee, by birth, but living firmly in the settler world through her marriage to the post's owner. "Can I help you?" Martha asked, setting down her pencil. Rebecca approached the counter, keeping her voice low even though no other customers were present. "I seek shelter on my journey. The night grows cold." Martha studied her with shrewd eyes. "Many travelers pass through. What brings you to these parts, Miss?" "Miller. Rebecca Miller." Using her real name was a calculated risk. If soldiers had connected her to the Cherokee, they would be looking for her under this name. But lies had a way of unraveling at inopportune moments, and Martha Redbird was her first test. "I search for family separated during the Troubles." Martha's expression revealed nothing, but she closed her ledger deliberately. "My husband's away until tomorrow. I could use help with evening chores in exchange for a place by the fire and a hot meal." "I'd be grateful," Rebecca replied, recognizing the offer for what it was, a chance for private conversation away from curious ears. Martha led her through a door behind the counter into private living quarters. The main room held a large hearth where a cooking pot bubbled, filling the space with the aroma of venison stew. The older woman gestured for Rebecca to sit at a worn table while she ladled 2 bowls. "Eat," she instructed, placing one before Rebecca along with a chunk of cornbread. "Then we'll talk." Rebecca hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first spoonful touched her lips. She ate slowly, savoring each bite, aware that Martha watched her with calculating eyes. When both had finished, Martha collected the bowls and returned to sit across from Rebecca. "Now," she said quietly, "tell me why Sarah Two Rivers sends a white woman carrying Cherokee medicine pouches to my door." Rebecca smiled faintly, touching the hidden pouch beneath her dress. Martha had noticed what the man outside had not. "Because I stand between worlds," she replied, using the direct translation of her Cherokee name. "And because we need help." Over the next hour, as darkness settled completely outside, Rebecca shared the broad outlines of the tribe's situation. Their winter in Wolf's Den, the murdered missionary, the new military commander, their desperate plan to reach sympathetic ears in the eastern cities. Martha listened without interruption, her fingers absently tracing patterns on the wooden tabletop. "The Quaker and the newspaper man," she said when Rebecca finished. "They stopped here 4 days ago, heading toward Asheville. They asked many questions about Cherokee treatment. Good men, I believe, but watch closely. Colonel Thornton has spies everywhere. Can I reach them before they leave the territory?" Martha considered this. Perhaps. They mentioned investigating conditions near the marshalling camp outside Asheville, where they're gathering Cherokee for the march west. "Terrible place, disease, little food." Her voice hardened. "My cousin's children are held there." Rebecca felt a surge of purpose. The marshalling camp would contain exactly the evidence they needed to document, evidence the government was trying to hide from Eastern observers. "I need to get there." "Not alone," Martha said firmly. "The roads are patrolled, and a woman traveling alone draws attention." "But," she paused, thoughtful, "my husband returns tomorrow with goods from Charleston. He makes the Asheville delivery 2 days after. You could travel with him as his niece." "Would he agree to this?" Rebecca asked. Martha's husband was white, a settler with business interests that could be ruined by association with Cherokee resistance. Martha's smile held a hint of pride. "John Redbird took my name when we married, not the other way around. He has no love for what's being done to my mother's people." She reached across the table to clasp Rebecca's hand. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we prepare your new story." That night, sleeping on a pallet near the kitchen hearth, Rebecca dreamed of Running Wolf. He stood on a mountain ridge, mist swirling around him as he sang a Cherokee protection song. The melody followed her into waking, lingering in her mind as morning light filtered through the small windows. John Redbird proved to be a tall, weathered man with kind eyes and a deliberate manner of speaking. He returned from Charleston with 3 heavily loaded wagons and a team of workers to unload them. Martha pulled him aside immediately upon his arrival, and Rebecca watched through the window as they conversed in low, serious tones. John glanced toward the trading post several times, his expression growing increasingly grave. When they came inside, he studied Rebecca with the same shrewd assessment his wife had shown. "Martha says you carry important documents," he said without preamble. "Documents that might help her cousins at the camp." Rebecca nodded. "If I can, reach the right people. Dangerous cargo," he observed, "for all of us." "I understand if you can't." He waved away her concern. "Didn't say I wouldn't help. Just noting the stakes." He exchanged a look with Martha. "We've been moving supplies to the Cherokee camps. Extra food, medicine, blankets. Army requisitions show them receiving twice what actually arrives. Someone's profiting from suffering." "John keeps careful records," Martha added. "Names, dates, quantities ordered versus delivered. The Quaker would find such information valuable, I expect." Hope surged in Rebecca's chest. This was exactly the kind of documentation they needed. Proof of systematic abuses rather than isolated incidents that could be dismissed as misunderstandings. "We leave for Asheville tomorrow," John said. "You'll travel as Martha's niece from Charleston. Come, to help with the spring inventory. Keep your face shaded. Some of the soldiers at Fort Westland come through here regularly." The next day dawned clear and cool, promising fair weather for travel. Rebecca found herself dressed in a clean, simple dress, borrowed from Martha, her hair neatly arranged beneath a bonnet with a deeper brim than her previous one. John had loaded the wagon with goods for Asheville merchants, creating a small space among the crates where Rebecca could ride in relative comfort. Martha embraced her before they departed. "Follow the plan," she murmured. "No unnecessary risks. The documents you carry are more important than any one of us." The journey to Asheville would take 2 days, with an overnight stop at a way station. Rebecca's nerves sang with tension as they pulled away from the trading post, every passing rider or distant figure triggering a spike of anxiety. John maintained a steady stream of casual conversation whenever others were within earshot, reinforcing their cover story while keeping military patrols from showing too much interest in his cargo or his supposed niece. They passed the first Army checkpoint without incident, John's regular trading status earning little more than a cursory inspection and a few minutes of idle conversation with soldiers who clearly knew him. Rebecca kept her head down, pretending to read a small devotional book Martha had provided for exactly this purpose. "Chapman's been reassigned," one of the soldiers mentioned as he handed back John's papers. "Entire garrison at Fort Westland has new command." "That's so," John replied with perfectly calibrated interest. "Who's running things now?" "Colonel Thornton. Real military man, not like Chapman who let the locals dictate terms. He's got orders to clear out every last Cherokee by summer's end. No exceptions." John nodded, as if this were merely interesting news, rather than a death sentence for many. "Sounds efficient." "Overdue, if you ask me," the soldier said, stepping back from the wagon. "Safe travels, Redbird." As they continued down the road, now officially in territory under Fort Westland's jurisdiction, John spoke in a low voice, without turning his head. "Thornton's reputation precedes him. He broke the Seminole resistance in the Florida campaign through systematic starvation. burned crops, poisoned water supplies, shot anyone who tried to hunt. Rebecca felt ill. The council suspected as much. That's why some groups have already started west, while others remain to fight through different means. Smart, John acknowledged. Division of forces was how the Seminoles survived as long as they did. Some fought, some fled, some negotiated, kept the army off balance. He clicked his tongue, urging the horses to maintain their pace as they rounded a bend. Problem is, Thornton learned from that campaign. He won't make the same mistakes twice. The militia checkpoint came into view. Ahead, a simple barricade across the road with 4 armed men checking all who passed. Unlike the regular army soldiers, these men were locals, settlers with personal grievances against the Cherokee and little military discipline. These are the dangerous ones, John muttered. Army follows orders, militia follows grudges. He was right. The inspection at this checkpoint was more thorough, the questions more pointed. One man with a sergeant's stripes peered into the wagon bed, poking at crates with suspicious determination. "What business in Asheville?" he demanded, returning to the front of the wagon. "Seasonal deliveries," John replied evenly. "Same as every spring, Sergeant Riley." The militia sergeant's gaze shifted to Rebecca. "And who's this?" "Don't recall. You traveling with women before, Redbird?" Rebecca kept her eyes downcast, heart hammering in her chest. They had rehearsed this, prepared for this moment. "My niece from Charleston," John said. "Martha's sister's girl, come to help with spring inventory." Riley stepped closer to the wagon, studying Rebecca with uncomfortable intensity. Looks familiar somehow. Rebecca clutched her devotional book tighter, turning slightly away as if embarrassed by the attention. Inside, her mind raced. Had he seen her before? During her time with the Cherokee? At Fort Westland? "Mary," John said, using the agreed-upon false name. "Sergeant Riley is addressing you." "Forgive me, sir," Rebecca murmured, forcing a slight Charleston accent into her speech. "I'm unaccustomed to such attention from strange men." Riley snorted, but stepped back. Lot of strangers on the road these days. Quakers, newspaper men, government agents, all poking their noses where they don't belong. He waved them through with visible reluctance. "Keep to the main roads. Cherokee renegades been spotted in these parts." John thanked him with appropriate deference and urged the horses forward. Neither he nor Rebecca spoke until the checkpoint was well behind them. "He suspected something," Rebecca said quietly. John nodded. "Riley's a problem. Former slave catcher who found new employment when that trade dried up locally. Has an eye for people who don't quite fit." He glanced at her. "He'll remember you. Now make the connection later, perhaps. We need to move quickly once we reach Asheville." They camped that night at a small way station that offered simple meals and sleeping space in a common room. Rebecca kept to herself, pleading weariness from travel, while John gathered information from other travelers. He returned to their corner with a bowl of stew and news delivered in hushed tones. Pennington and the newspaper man, Wallace, are still in Asheville. They've been denied access to the Cherokee holding camp twice, but continue to petition the authorities. "Will they leave soon?" Rebecca asked, worried they might miss their opportunity. "Not likely. Word is they're determined. Pennington has connections in Washington, a second cousin who serves as secretary to a senator or some such relation. Gives him standing the authorities can't entirely ignore." Rebecca felt a flicker of hope. "Can you get me to them?" "And do better," John said, his voice dropping further. "I can get them to you. I supply several merchants in Asheville, including a Quaker family who runs a small dry goods store. They've been hosting Pennington and Wallace. We'll deliver there first, tomorrow." The night passed slowly. Rebecca too anxious to sleep deeply in the common room, filled with snoring travelers. She touched Running Wolf's knife, concealed in a special pocket Martha had sewn into her borrowed dress, drawing comfort from the connection to him and all she was fighting for. Dawn had barely broken when John roused her. "We leave early," he murmured. "I don't like the looks of some who arrived last night. Bounty hunters by my guess." They departed without breakfast, John pushing the horses harder than the previous day. Asheville appeared in the distance by mid-morning, the growing town spreading across the valley with new construction visible at its edges. Rebecca had visited only once before with her parents, years ago. It seemed larger now, more permanent, a symbol of the inexorable spread of settler civilization. John navigated the streets with practiced ease, avoiding the busier thoroughfares in favor of quieter, side streets. They eventually pulled up behind a modest two-story building with Thomason's Dry Goods painted on a simple sign. A grey-haired man in a plain black coat, distinctive Quaker attire, emerged from the back door. "John Redbird," he greeted warmly. "We'd begun to worry." "Checkpoints are more numerous, friend Thomason," John replied, climbing down from the wagon. "I've brought your order and something more valuable besides." Friend Thomason's intelligent eyes moved to Rebecca. Unlike the militia sergeant, his gaze held no suspicion, only thoughtful assessment. "Come inside, both of you. Ruth has just set out the midday meal." The Thomason home above the store was simply furnished but comfortable. Ruth Thomason, a serene woman with silver-streaked brown hair, welcomed them without questions, serving a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold chicken. Only when they had eaten did Ezra Thomason broach the real purpose of their visit. "John says thee carries important information regarding our Cherokee neighbors," he said to Rebecca. She nodded. "I lived among them for 3 years. I witnessed the violations of treaties, the forced removals, the conditions in which they're held." She glanced at John, who nodded encouragement. "I seek to speak with Elias Pennington and his newspaper companion." Ruth and Ezra exchanged looks. "They lodge here," Ruth confirmed, "but they are closely watched. Yesterday, a militia officer came with questions about their activities." "The authorities grow nervous about their investigations," Ezra added. "They've been refused entry to the holding camp repeatedly, though they observed from a distance and spoke with several Cherokee who had permission to work in town." "When will they return?" Rebecca asked. "By supper," Ruth said. "They attend a meeting with a government Indian agent this afternoon, one who may be sympathetic to their concerns." She studied Rebecca with kind eyes. "Thee should rest until then. Thee looks wearied by hard travel and harder burdens." Rebecca couldn't argue with that assessment. Ruth showed her to a small guest room where she could wash away the dust. Of travel and rest, the soft bed with its clean quilts seemed impossibly luxurious after months of cave floors and forest camps. She must have dozed, for the next thing she knew, Ruth was gently shaking her awake. "They have returned," the Quaker woman said softly, "and are eager to meet thee." Rebecca quickly straightened her borrowed dress and followed Ruth downstairs to the Thomasons' private sitting room. 2 men rose as she entered. The older, Elias Pennington, had a full white beard and the same plain black coat as Ezra, though his eyes held a fire that belied his Quaker pacifism. The younger man, presumably Wallace, was clean-shaven with spectacles and an air of restless energy. "This is the young woman John Redbird mentioned," Ezra said by way of introduction. "She has lived among the Cherokee and witnessed much." Pennington studied her with intelligent eyes. "Thee has taken great risk to come here, I think." Rebecca met his gaze directly. "No greater risk than those I speak for face every day." Something in her tone must have convinced him of her sincerity, for he nodded and gestured for her to sit. "We have heard many accounts of injustice, but few from someone who has lived among the Cherokee as thee has." "And none," Wallace added, From a white woman who chose their way of life over returning to settlement. His tone held no judgment, only journalistic interest in an unusual story. Over the next 2 hours, Rebecca shared everything. Her original integration into the tribe after her parents' death, the arrival of soldiers at Fort Westland, her forced role as guide, Running Wolf's intervention, and the winter at Wolf's Den. She detailed the council's debates, the murder of the missionary carrying their appeals, and their desperate plan to bring evidence of treaty violations to public attention. Wallace took copious notes, occasionally asking for clarification on specific points. Pennington listened in thoughtful silence, his expression growing increasingly grave. "The documents," he said finally. "The mentioned carrying documentation." Rebecca nodded, and with Ruth standing guard at the door, carefully extracted the papers sewn into her dress lining. She spread them on the table, affidavits from tribal members documenting specific instances of violence and property theft, maps showing encroachment on guaranteed Cherokee lands, copies of treaty sections with annotations showing direct violations. "There's more," she added, turning to John Redbird. "Tell them what you've discovered about the supply shortages." John produced his own small ledger book, opening it to reveal meticulous records of supplies ordered for Cherokee camps versus what actually arrived. Army requisitions show full supplies of food, medicine, blankets, but the actual deliveries are half those amounts, sometimes less. Someone profits from each shipment. Wallace's eyes widened as he examined the figures. "This is systematic, deliberate, criminal," Pennington stated flatly. "And thee has proof." John nodded. "Delivery receipts signed by camp officials showing the shortfalls. Original. Requisition documents showing full orders. I've supplied these camps for 2 years. Martha insisted I keep records when we first noticed the discrepancies." Pennington stroked his beard thoughtfully. "This gives us leverage. Theft of government supplies is something even removal supporters would condemn." He turned to Wallace. "Can thee craft this into a story compelling enough for Philadelphia? Readers to care about people they've never met?" The journalist nodded confidently. "Corruption, theft, suffering children, these are universal concerns. I can make them care." "But will it be enough?" Rebecca asked, the question that had haunted her throughout her journey. "Words on paper against rifles and removal orders?" "Words have power," Pennington said gently. "Not immediate, perhaps, not enough to stop all suffering, but they plant seeds that grow into action." He leaned forward. "The Cherokee resistance cannot be only about immediate survival, though that matters desperately. It must also be about historical record, ensuring that what happens now is documented, remembered, judged by future generations." Rebecca understood his point, though it offered cold comfort to those currently suffering. "There's more we need," she said. "Access to the marshalling camp outside town. Evidence of conditions there would strengthen your reporting." Wallace exchanged glances with Pennington. "We've been denied entry 3 times. They know exactly what we'd find. Overcrowding, inadequate shelter, disease, malnutrition." "I may be able to help with that," John Redbird interjected. "I have a legitimate delivery scheduled there tomorrow, food supplies and medicine. I could request assistance, bring Rebecca as a worker." Pennington looked troubled. "The risk would be considerable." "I didn't come this far to stop at considerable risk," Rebecca said firmly. "I need to see those people, to carry word back to the council about who has been captured, what conditions they face. And you need first-hand accounts and observations for your reporting." A long silence followed as each person weighed the dangers against the potential benefits. Finally, Pennington nodded. "If thee is determined, we will support thee. But caution must be our watchword. The camp guards have orders to arrest anyone attempting to document conditions. I'll go as well, Wallace decided. As an official observer with Pennington's government contacts backing me, they've denied us as a pair, but a single journalist accompanying a supply wagon might slip through with less scrutiny. The plan took shape over the next hour. John would bring his legitimate delivery to the camp the following morning, with Rebecca disguised as a hired helper and Wallace posing as a clerk, documenting the delivery for merchant records. Pennington would create a distraction by formally requesting another official visit through proper channels, drawing attention from their actual attempt. That night, alone in the Thomasons' guest room, Rebecca found herself thinking of Running Wolf and the others at Wolf's Den. Were they safe? Had his plan to unnerve the soldiers through ghostly manifestations succeeded? She touched the knife he had given her, drawing strength from the connection. Sleep eventually claimed her, but her dreams were troubled. Images of Cherokee children marching westward through snow, of Running Wolf pursued by soldiers, of Sarah Two Rivers tending to the sick in overcrowded camps. She woke before dawn, a sense of urgency propelling her from bed. The morning brought grey skies and a light drizzle that shrouded Asheville in mist. Perfect weather for their purposes, John observed as they loaded the wagon with supplies. The poor visibility would make observation and recognition more difficult. Rebecca wore the plainest of Martha's dresses, a shapeless brown garment unlikely to draw attention. She smudged her face with ash from the hearth and arranged her hair in a severe style that aged her considerably. Wallace, for his part, had donned spectacles with clear glass and carried a ledger book prominently. "Remember," John instructed as they prepared to leave, "keep your eyes down but miss nothing. Speak as little as possible. If questioned directly, you're Mary Cooper, hired to help with spring deliveries because my usual boy broke his leg." Pennington clasped each of their hands in turn. "May the light guide and protect thee," he said solemnly. "We will be ready when thee returns." The marshalling camp appeared through the mist as they approached. A nightmarish collection of hastily constructed wooden structures surrounded by a high fence topped with barbed wire. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, while others stood at the single gate through which wagons entered and exited. John presented his delivery papers to the gate guard, his manner professional and disinterested. "Supply wagon for the quartermaster. Food, medicine, blankets." The guard barely glanced at the documents before waving them through. Inside, the true horror of the camp became apparent. Cherokee families huddled in overcrowded shelters that leaked in the rain. Children with hollow eyes and thin limbs sat listlessly in the mud. Elders wrapped in inadequate blankets shivered despite the mild spring temperatures, clearly ill with fever or tuberculosis. Rebecca fought to maintain her impassive expression as John directed the wagon toward a supply shed where a harried-looking army clerk waited to receive the delivery. Wallace immediately engaged the clerk in conversation about inventory procedures, creating the opportunity for Rebecca to move among the nearby shelters, ostensibly checking which supplies were most urgently needed. "Medicine first," she murmured to a Cherokee woman who watched her with suspicious eyes. "I'm a friend from Wolf's Den." The woman's expression changed subtly. "Many sick," she whispered back. "Coughing sickness takes the elders, fever takes the children. Not enough food, not enough clean water." "Names," Rebecca said quietly. "I need names of who is here, for those who search for their families." Understanding dawned in the woman's eyes. She moved among the nearby shelters, whispering to others, who began to come forward one by one, providing names and clan affiliations in hushed tones. Rebecca committed each to memory, building a mental roster of the captured. As she worked, she catalogued other observations. the inadequate sanitation that would lead to disease, the poor construction of shelters that offered little protection from the elements, the visible signs of malnutrition among the children. This was not merely hardship. It was systematic neglect designed to weaken and demoralize. Wallace, meanwhile, had maneuvered the clerk into showing him the camp's requisition records under the guise of ensuring proper delivery. His sharp eyes noted discrepancies between what was ordered and what actually arrived, confirming John's records of systematic theft. They had been in the camp nearly an hour when a commotion at the gate drew attention. Rebecca glanced up to see Elias Pennington engaged in animated discussion with the camp commander, several armed guards hovering nearby. The distraction was working perfectly, all eyes drawn to the well-known Quaker activist while they continued their documentation. A Cherokee elder approached Rebecca, his weathered face marked with dignity despite his circumstances. "You come from the free bands," he said softly in Cherokee, "from Greyhawk's people." She nodded slightly. "I carry messages to those who might help. Tell Greyhawk that Stone Thrower's band was captured 3 days ago near the eastern pass. Only the younger warriors escaped." His eyes held hers intently. "Tell him they seek the sacred bundles. The soldiers search for something they call medicine bags that hold our power." Rebecca felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air. The sacred bundles contained ceremonial objects of immense spiritual importance to the Cherokee, irreplaceable items passed down through generations. If the army was specifically targeting these cultural treasures, "I will tell him," she promised. "Is there more I should know?" The elder glanced around cautiously. "The dark-haired officer, the one they call Major Ellis, he questions the young ones about hideouts in the mountains, offers food to those who talk." His expression darkened. Some have grown hungry enough to answer. This was grave news indeed. If the army had information about mountain refuges like Wolf's Den, no one there was safe. John appeared at her side, his manner casual, but his eyes warning. "Time to finish up, Mary. Weather's turning worse." Rebecca nodded, understanding his real message. They had pushed their luck far enough. Wallace had already returned to the wagon, his ledger book filled with notes disguised as inventory records. As they prepared to leave, a soldier approached, an officer with a captain's insignia, and cold, evaluating eyes. "Hold there," he called to John. "New procedures require inspection of all outgoing wagons." Rebecca kept her head down, heart pounding as the captain circled their wagon. Had they been discovered? Was this routine, or had someone recognized her? "Lot of interest in our little camp today," the captain remarked conversationally. First, the Quaker making a fuss at the gate, now a delivery with unusual assistance. His gaze lingered on Rebecca. "Haven't seen you with Redbird's deliveries before," John answered smoothly. "Spring brings extra work. Mary here is temporary help, while my regular boy recovers from a broken leg." The captain hummed non-committally, continuing his circuit of the wagon. "Curious thing happened yesterday. Militia sergeant from the western checkpoint reported a woman traveling with you who reminded him of someone, a settler girl who went native years back, then disappeared during a military operation at Fort Westland last fall." His hand rested casually on his holstered pistol. "Riley has a good memory for faces, they say." Rebecca felt rather than saw Wallace tense beside her. John's expression remained impassive, but she noticed his hand drift toward the knife at his belt. "Interesting story," John replied evenly, "though I can't say I see the relevance to inspecting my empty wagon." The captain smiled without warmth. "Just making conversation while I do my duty." He peered into the wagon bed, now empty of supplies. "All seems in order." He stepped back, but his gaze returned to Rebecca. "You know, I believe Major Ellis would be interested in speaking with your help here. He has questions about Cherokee, hiding in the mountains. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. One word from this captain, and they would be detained, searched, discovered. The documents might make it out through Wallace, but Rebecca would certainly face imprisonment, or worse. Then a shout came from across the compound. "Captain Reynolds, needed at the south fence. Situation developing." The captain hesitated, clearly reluctant to abandon his suspicions. "Wait here," he ordered. "I'll return shortly." The moment he was out of earshot, John hissed, "Now! We leave now!" They climbed onto the wagon with deliberate calm, John nodding to the gate guards, as if nothing were amiss. Rebecca kept her face turned away, praying the guards hadn't been alerted to the captain's suspicions. The wagon rolled through the gate at a measured pace that must have cost John enormous restraint. Only when they had rounded a bend in the road, putting the camp out of sight, did he urge the horses to greater speed. "He knew," Wallace said, his voice tight with leftover tension, or suspected at least. "Riley," John confirmed grimly. "I feared he might make the connection." He glanced at Rebecca. "You're not safe in Asheville now. They'll be looking for you." "I learned what I needed to," she replied, mind racing with the implications of all she had witnessed and heard. "The council must know about the captured warriors, the questions about mountain hideouts, the search for sacred bundles. And we have what we need as well," Wallace said, patting his ledger. "Documented proof of corruption, neglect, and abuse. Pennington's Philadelphia contacts will ensure it reaches Washington. If you get out of Asheville to send it," John pointed out. "The militia will be watching the roads now, especially with that captain's suspicions aroused." They returned to the Thomasons' store by a circuitous route, using alleyways and side streets to avoid main thoroughfares where militia might patrol. Pennington was waiting, his expression shifting from relief to concern as they related what had happened. "They must leave immediately," he told Rebecca. "The militia has patrols on all main roads already. They claim to be looking for Cherokee raiders, but now I suspect they seek thee." "How?" she asked. "The western route is watched, and that's my way back to Wolf's Den." Ezra Thomason cleared his throat. "There is another way. Difficult, but less patrolled." He spread a map on the table, pointing to a northern route through the mountains. "This trail is used by hunters and trappers. It eventually connects to paths that could lead thee back to Cherokee territory, though not directly to where thee came from." Rebecca studied the unfamiliar route. "How would I find my way? I don't know these northern passes." "I have a friend," Ezra said, "a trapper who uses these trails. He has no love for the army or militia, having lost land to them years ago. He would guide thee for a price." "I have no money," Rebecca admitted. John Redbird placed a small pouch on the table. "Consider it payment for the risk you took today. The information you gathered may save my wife's relatives." Plans formed quickly after that. The trapper, a man called Jenkins, would meet Rebecca at a designated point outside town at dusk. Wallace would compile his report and leave with Pennington. The following day by stage, taking an eastern route where their Quaker connections would provide safe passage. "The Creator guided our paths to cross," Pennington told Rebecca as they made final preparations. "For purposes perhaps larger than we can see. I hope the Creator has good eyesight," she replied with grim humor, "because the path ahead looks very dark from where I stand." Pennington's eyes crinkled with unexpected amusement. "The light shines brightest in darkness, young friend. Remember that in the days ahead." As dusk approached, Rebecca changed into clothes more suitable for mountain travel. Sturdy trousers, a woolen shirt, and a weathered coat, all provided by the resourceful Thomasons. She carefully transferred Running Wolf's knife and medicine pouch to her new attire. Ruth Thomason packed food for her journey, and added a small Bible. "For protection," she explained. "If stopped, thee can claim to be a missionary's assistant." View questioned those on the Lord's work. The farewells were brief but heartfelt. These people had risked much to help her mission, and she might never see them again. "Tell Running Wolf," John Redbird said as he prepared to escort her to the meeting point, "that the Redbirds keep faith with old promises. He will understand." Outside Asheville, as the last light faded from the sky, Rebecca met Jenkins, a grizzled, taciturn man who evaluated her with skeptical eyes. "Thought they were sending a boy," he grumbled. "Girl's gonna slow us down." "This girl crossed the Western Mountains in winter with Cherokee guides," Rebecca replied evenly. Jenkins adjusted the worn leather pack on his shoulders and spat to the side of the trail. "Mountains getting steeper from here. We'll cut east at the ridge, follow the old deer trail down to the valley." His voice was gruff, but not unkind, worn smooth like river rocks by years in the wilderness. 5 days they had traveled together now, pushing deeper into the mountains by paths no army patrol would think to follow. Rebecca had quickly proven herself capable enough to earn the trappers' grudging respect, keeping pace without complaint despite the difficult terrain. The April sun filtered through new spring leaves, dappling the forest floor with shifting patterns of light. Rebecca breathed deeply, drawing in the scent of pine and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, a hawk cried out, its voice echoing against distant cliffs. After the tension of Asheville and the horrors of the marshalling camp, the wilderness felt like a sanctuary, though she knew better than to surrender to false security. Danger lurked in these mountains, both natural and human. "Armies been through. That valley recent," Jenkins remarked, pointing to the lowlands spread below them. "See there? Smoke from campfires, too many to be travelers or hunters." Rebecca shaded her eyes, spotting the thin columns of smoke rising between the trees. "How many, do you think?" 30 men, maybe more. Regular patrol wouldn't be so large." Jenkins scratched his grizzled beard thoughtfully. "Might be that new colonel setting up another outpost. Thornton, I think they call him." The name sent a chill through Rebecca. Colonel Thornton's reputation for ruthlessness had only been confirmed by what she'd witnessed in Asheville. If he was establishing a new outpost in this valley, it would cut off yet another escape route for Cherokee families trying to avoid capture. "We need to go around," she said, calculating distances. "How much time will it add?" Jenkins squinted at the sky. "Day and a half, maybe 2. Have to climb higher, cross the ridge where it gets narrow. Dangerous in spots, but possible." He nodded once. "For someone who doesn't stumble like a newborn colt, which you don't, I'll grant you that." It was as close to a compliment as the old trapper offered. Rebecca shouldered her own pack, lighter than his, but still substantial. "Then we climb!" The detour took them along game trails barely visible to the untrained eye, up rocky slopes where handholds were few and footing treacherous. Jenkins moved with the assured confidence of someone who had traversed these mountains for decades, occasionally pointing out hazards or identifying edible plants they passed. Rebecca followed, closely, grateful for his knowledge, even as she memorized the route for future reference. By nightfall, they had reached a narrow shelf halfway up the mountainside, offering enough flat ground to make camp and a small spring for fresh water. Jenkins built a tiny fire, shielded from view by rock formations that would disperse the smoke. "One more hard day tomorrow," he said as they shared a simple meal of dried venison and foraged greens. "Then we hit Cherokee country proper. I don't venture much beyond that." Rebecca nodded, understanding his caution. "You've been more help than I had any right to expect." "Thomason paid fair," Jenkins replied with a shrug. "And I've no love for Thornton's kind. Met his sort before during the creek removals down south." His weathered face darkened at the memory. Saw things no man with a conscience should stomach. "That's why I'm going back," Rebecca said quietly. to prevent more such things if possible. Jenkins studied her across the small fire, his expression unreadable in the flickering light. Redbird says you lived with the Cherokee, more than lived, became one of them. As much as someone with my skin can, she acknowledged. Unusual choice for a settler woman. Rebecca touched the medicine pouch at her neck, thinking of all that had led her to this moment. Less a choice, more a recognition of where I belonged. Jenkins seemed to accept this without further comment. After a moment he asked, "This scout of yours, Running Wolf," Redbird spoke of him with respect. "Old ally. You know him." Rebecca couldn't hide her surprise. Jenkins's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. These mountains hold few secrets from those who've walked them long enough. Half Cherokee, half Shawnee, moves like a shadow. Seen him from distance over the years. Never spoke. Man keeps to himself, but leaves fair warning signs when other trappers venture too close to sacred land. He nodded approvingly. Honorable. Some would just put an arrow through a trespasser without warning. Rebecca felt a surge of warmth at this confirmation of Running Wolf's character from an unexpected source. He saved my life. Many lives. They must think highly of you then. Cherokee men don't typically risk themselves for outsiders. Jenkins' shrewd eyes assessed her with new interest. Unless you're no longer considered outside. Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks and busied herself adjusting the small fire. Jenkins chuckled softly, but didn't press further. Before dawn, they were moving again, climbing steadily as the first light painted the eastern sky in delicate pinks and golds. The path narrowed dangerously in places, forcing them to press against the rock face as they inched forward. Rebecca's muscles burned with the effort, but she welcomed the physical challenge as a distraction from her racing thoughts. What would she find when she returned to Wolf's den? Had Running Wolf's plan to create ghostly diversions succeeded? Had Stone Bear's anger cooled, or had he pushed for more direct confrontation despite the Council's caution? Most pressingly, had Thornton's forces discovered any of the hidden Cherokee camps? By midday, they had reached the highest point of their journey, a rocky promontory that offered breathtaking views in all directions. Jenkins paused, allowing Rebecca to catch her breath while he surveyed the landscape with practiced eyes. Armies spread thin, he observed, pointing to tiny columns of smoke visible at widely spaced intervals. Too many mountains, not enough. Men, good for your people. Your people. The casual acknowledgement of her allegiance warmed her more than it should have. From here we follow the ridge eastward until it begins to descend, Jenkins continued. There's a waterfall near the bottom, good landmark. Beyond that, maybe half a day's walk, you'll reach territory the Cherokee still control, more or less. Will I find Wolf's den from there? Rebecca asked, trying to orient herself within this unfamiliar part of the mountains. Jenkins shook his head. You're coming in from the north. Wolf's den lies southwest of where we'll part ways. He hesitated, then added, but there's a seasonal camp the Cherokee use for hunting in this area. Might find guides there willing to take you the rest of the way. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best she could hope for under the circumstances. Rebecca nodded her agreement, and they continued along the ridge, the path widening enough to make travel less perilous. The weather changed suddenly as afternoon deepened, clouds gathering with surprising speed. Jenkins eyed the darkening sky with concern. Storm coming. Spring thunderstorms hit hard up here. As if in answer, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the mountains. Rebecca felt the air pressure change, the wind picking up strength and carrying the scent of rain. How far to shelter? Too far, Jenkins replied grimly. We need to get down from this ridge before lightning starts. Follow close. He increased his pace, moving with remarkable agility for a man of his years. Rebecca matched him step for step, aware that their exposed position on the ridge made them vulnerable to lightning strikes. The first fat drops of rain began to fall as they located a narrow trail leading downward, more goat path than human route. The gentle rain quickly transformed into a downpour, turning the steep path treacherous with mud and loose stones. Rebecca's foot slipped more than once, forcing her to catch herself against the rocky slope. Jenkins remained sure-footed ahead of her, occasionally reaching back to offer a steadying hand at particularly difficult sections. Lightning flashed, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that Rebecca felt in her chest. The storm was directly overhead now, transforming day into an eerie twilight, broken by brilliant flashes of electricity. Jenkins pointed urgently toward a dark opening in the rock face ahead, a small cave or overhang that would offer shelter until the worst passed. They had nearly reached it when Rebecca heard a sound that froze her blood, the unmistakable crack of a rifle, distinct from thunder even in this chaos. Jenkins heard it too, his head snapping up in alarm. Then came another shot and another. "Someone's fighting down there," he said, gesturing toward the forested slope below. "Stay here in the shelter. I'll scout ahead." "I'm coming with you," Rebecca countered, already checking that Running Wolf's knife was secure in its sheath. "If it's Cherokee, all the more reason for you to stay hidden," Jenkins argued. "You're carrying information they need. Getting yourself killed or captured helps no one." The logic was sound, but Rebecca couldn't bear the thought of hiding while others fought. "We'll both go, but cautiously. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. Jenkins looked like he might argue further, but another volley of gunfire decided the matter. With a curt nod, he led the way along a game trail that wound downward through dense undergrowth, now dripping with rain. They moved silently despite the wet conditions, Jenkins demonstrating why he was considered one of the best trappers in the region. Rebecca followed his example, placing her feet carefully to avoid snapping branches or dislodging stones. The rain provided useful cover, muffling small sounds and reducing visibility. The gunfire grew louder as they descended, accompanied now by shouting voices. Through gaps in the trees, Rebecca caught glimpses of movement, men in uniform struggling through underbrush, pursuing something or someone. Jenkins held up a hand, signaling her to stop. He pointed toward a dense thicket where they could observe. Without being seen, from this vantage point, the scene below became clearer. A group of soldiers, perhaps 15 men, had surrounded a smaller party attempting to flee upslope. The fugitives appeared to be Cherokee, including women and at least 1 child. "Hunting party with families," Jenkins whispered, his experienced eye taking in details Rebecca might have missed. "Got caught too far from safe territory." Rebecca counted quickly. 7 Cherokee adults, 2 with hunting bows, the others unarmed. 1 woman carried a small child, while an older child, perhaps 8 or 9, clung to her skirts. They had taken cover behind fallen logs and rocks, but their position was poor, with soldiers closing in from multiple directions. "We have to help them," Rebecca said, already calculating options. 2 against 15 armed soldiers were terrible odds, but surprise might give them some advantage. Jenkins shook his head grimly. "Can't win this fight. Best hope is distraction. Give them a chance to break and run while the soldiers are confused." Before they could formulate a plan, movement on the far side of the clearing caught Rebecca's attention. A shadow detached itself from the forest, then another and another. Her heart leaped as she recognized the distinctive painted faces and silent movement of Cherokee warriors. A rescue party had arrived, but they were still badly outnumbered, perhaps 7 warriors against 15 soldiers with superior weapons. Without coordination, even with the element of surprise, they might all be killed. "The warriors don't know we're here," Rebecca whispered urgently. "If we create a diversion from this side while they attack from the other," Jenkins nodded, catching her meaning. Divide the soldiers' attention. Give the families a chance to escape in the confusion. He reached into his pack and withdrew a small leather pouch. Got something that might help. Hunter's trick for driving game. From the pouch, he produced several small bundles of tightly wrapped material. Smoke bombs of a sort. Pine resin, certain herbs, other things. Create thick smoke, especially in damp conditions like this. Won't last long, but might be enough. Rebecca watched as he struck flint against steel, carefully lighting the first bundle. The moment it began to smoke, he hurled it with surprising accuracy into the midst of the soldiers. Before they could react, he lit and threw two more in quick succession, creating a triangle of intensifying smoke that the rain couldn't immediately disperse. Confusion erupted among the soldiers. Voices shouted conflicting orders as the smoke obscured their vision. Rebecca seized the moment to dash along the ridgeline, finding a position where she could be seen by the Cherokee warriors waiting to attack. Drawing on everything Running Wolf had taught her, she made the Cherokee signal for attack from two sides. For a breathless moment, she feared they hadn't seen her or wouldn't trust a signal from a white woman. Then one warrior raised a hand in acknowledgement before turning to his companions with rapid instructions. The coordinated attack happened so quickly that the soldiers, already disoriented by the smoke, had no chance to form an effective defense. Warriors struck from one side, while Jenkins, showing remarkable skill for a man who claimed to avoid conflict, fired precise shots from another angle, creating the impression of a much larger attacking force. Rebecca focused on reaching the trapped families, moving through the chaos with single-minded determination. "This way," she called in Cherokee as she approached their position. While they're confused, head east, up the slope. The Cherokee woman with the children looked at her with stunned disbelief, clearly not expecting help from someone who appeared to be a settler. Rebecca switched to Cherokee, identifying herself quickly as a friend from Wolf's Den. Understanding bloomed in the woman's eyes, and she urgently gathered the others, pointing toward the escape route Rebecca indicated. The firefight intensified as soldiers regrouped and returned fire more effectively. Rebecca heard a cry of pain from the warrior's position. Someone had been hit. Jenkins appeared at her side, his face streaked with gunpowder and rain. "Families clear?" he demanded. She nodded. Heading up slope, the warriors, one's down, others covering his retreat. Jenkins raised his rifle and fired, causing a soldier who had been advancing to duck for cover. "We need to go. Now. Smoke's clearing." Rebecca hesitated, torn between escaping with Jenkins and helping the warriors, who had come to the family's rescue. The decision was made for her when a bullet splintered bark inches from her head. Jenkins grabbed her arm, pulling her into the cover of denser forest as more shots followed. They ran in a crouching zigzag, using the terrain and vegetation for cover. The sounds of battle faded behind them as they pushed upward through the rain-soaked forest. Only when they had put considerable distance between themselves and the soldiers did Jenkins signal a stop to catch their breath. "The families?" Rebecca gasped, her lungs burning from the exertion. "Different route, but same general direction," Jenkins assured her. "They know these mountains. They'll find safety if they can put enough distance behind them." "And the warriors?" Jenkins's expression turned grim. "One definitely wounded. Others were covering his retreat when we left. They're skilled. Better chances than most would have against those odds." Rebecca leaned against a tree trunk, processing the unexpected encounter. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "You didn't have to involve yourself." The old trapper shrugged. "Told Thomason I'd get you to Cherokee territory. Didn't specify you'd be the only Cherokee I'd help." A rare smile cracked his weathered face. "Besides, never did like bullies, especially ones with government backing." They continued upward, following a different path than originally planned to avoid any soldiers who might come searching. The storm gradually passed, leaving behind a glistening, dripping forest and the fresh scent of rain-washed air. By dusk, they had reached a high meadow where Jenkins determined it was safe enough to make a small camp. "Those families will spread word of what happened," Rebecca observed, as they shared the last of their provisions. "If any reach Wolf's Den, they'll report a white woman who spoke Cherokee and a grizzled old trapper who throws smoking bundles," Jenkins finished for her. "Your running wolf seems the type to piece that together quickly enough." "He's not my running wolf," Rebecca protested automatically, though the words lacked conviction. Jenkins's knowing look made her flush. "Girl, I've lived alone in these mountains for 30 years by choice. Even I can recognize when two paths are meant to join." He gestured toward her medicine pouch. "Cherokee don't give those lightly, especially not to outsiders." Rebecca touched the pouch reflexively. "It's complicated." "Life always is," Jenkins agreed. "Death's the simple part. Everything between birth and burial. That's where the real challenges lie." He stoked their tiny fire thoughtfully. "What will you do if you can't find Wolf's Den? Or if they've had to abandon it?" The question had haunted her throughout the journey from Asheville. "There are other camps, other bands still free in the mountains. I'll find them, deliver what I've learned." Jenkins nodded. "Good to have alternatives. Speaking of which..." He rummaged in his pack and extracted a folded piece of oilcloth. Opening it revealed a detailed map drawn on deerskin. "Figured this might help, case we got separated or you need to continue alone." The map showed the mountain range with remarkable accuracy, with tiny symbols indicating water sources, shelters, dangerous areas, and most valuably, known Cherokee territories. Rebecca stared at it in amazement. "I can't take this, it's too valuable." "Can and will," Jenkins countered firmly. "I've got another, and the important parts are up here anyway." He tapped his temple. "Consider it payment for the most interesting journey I've had in years." The next morning dawned clear, the storm having washed the world clean. They set out early, following Jenkins's map toward the seasonal Cherokee hunting camp he believed would be occupied this time of year. The journey was easier now, the terrain less steep as they followed a river valley eastward. By midday, Jenkins stopped at a large moss-covered boulder shaped roughly like a bear. "This is where we part ways," he said. "Cherokee hunting camp. Lies 2 hours that direction following the river." He pointed southeast. "They'll have sentries posted. Approach openly, hands visible, speaking Cherokee if you can manage it." Rebecca felt a surprising reluctance to part from this taciturn man who had guided her so capably. "I can't thank you enough." Jenkins waved away her gratitude. "Just doing what was paid for." He hesitated, then added gruffly, "Though I wouldn't object if someday you were to leave word at Thomason's about how things turned out, for curiosity's sake." She smiled, recognizing the sentiment behind the casual request. "I'll make sure of it." He nodded once, apparently satisfied, then turned to go. After a few steps, he paused and looked back. "One more thing. If you encounter that running wolf of yours, tell him old Jenkins says the northern passes will be heavily patrolled by summer. There's a new trail marked on that map that skirts the army outposts. Safer route for anyone needing to move between territories." With that final piece of assistance, he disappeared into the forest, moving with the silent efficiency that had kept him alive in these mountains for decades. Rebecca watched until he was gone from sight, then consulted the map, orienting herself before continuing along the river as directed. The forest grew denser as she followed the water's edge, rich with new spring growth. Birds called from the canopy above, and occasionally small animals rustled in the underbrush. After nearly 2 hours of steady walking, Rebecca began to notice subtle signs of human presence. A recently broken branch here, a carefully arranged stone there. She was being watched. Following Jenkins's advice, she stopped in a small clearing where she would be clearly visible. Keeping her hands in plain sight, she called out in Cherokee, identifying herself as Rebecca Stands Between from Wolf's Den, returning with important information for the council. Silence followed her announcement, but she could feel eyes evaluating her from hidden positions. Finally, a voice responded from the trees to her left. The woman called Stands Between traveled west with John Redbird. How does she come from the north? Rebecca carefully explained her journey, the mission to Asheville, the complications that forced her to take a northern route back, the encounter with the Army patrol pursuing Cherokee families. She mentioned Jenkins by name, hoping it might carry some recognition. After another long pause, 3 warriors emerged from the forest, bows ready but not aimed directly at her. Their leader, a man with a hawk feather in his hair, studied her intently. "I am Swift Arrow of the Bird Clan," he said finally. "We received word 3 days ago of a white woman who helped our people escape soldiers near the Thunder Rocks." "This is you," Rebecca nodded. "With a trapper called Jenkins, the families, did they reach safety?" "They reached our camp yesterday. The mother with children spoke of a pale woman who called herself Stands Between and spoke our language." Swift Arrow's posture relaxed slightly. "The warriors also returned, carrying their wounded brother. They confirmed this story." Relief flooded through Rebecca. "I need to reach Wolf's Den, or any council member who can receive important information from Asheville." Swift Arrow exchanged glances with his companions. Wolf's Den was abandoned 10 days ago. Colonel Thornton's soldiers found its location from a captured hunter. Rebecca's heart sank. Where did they go? Is everyone safe? "Many questions," Swift Arrow observed, though not unkindly. "Come to our camp first. Our chief's sister is there. She serves on Greyhawk's council. She will decide what you should know and how you might be helped." It was a cautious response, but Rebecca couldn't blame them for their wariness. She followed the warriors along nearly invisible trails that paralleled the river before turning deeper into the forest. Eventually, they reached a well-hidden camp, nestled in a sheltered valley, a temporary settlement of hide-covered structures and central fire pits where perhaps 40 Cherokee lived. Children stopped their play to stare as Rebecca entered the camp. Adults looked up from various tasks with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. Swift Arrow led her directly to a large central shelter where an older woman sat working on a basket, her fingers weaving with practiced precision despite her advanced years. "Morning light," Swift Arrow addressed her respectfully. "I bring the one called Stands Between, who seeks Greyhawk's counsel with news from the eastern settlements." The elderly woman set aside her basket and scrutinized Rebecca with sharp, intelligent eyes. "So," she said after a thorough assessment, "you are the white woman who walks Cherokee paths. Sarah Two Rivers spoke of you when our bands gathered at the last moon." Rebecca felt a surge of hope. "You've seen Sarah recently. Is she well? What of Greyhawk and the others from Wolf's Den?" Morning Light raised a hand, stemming the flow of questions. "Patience serves wisdom better than haste. Sit, eat, then we will speak of important matters." The rebuke was gentle but clear. Rebecca accepted the offered place by the fire and the simple meal of corn cakes and dried berries provided by a young woman. Only when she had eaten and accepted a cup of herbal tea did Morning Light resume the conversation. "Wolf's Den was compromised," the elder confirmed. "A hunter was captured, weakened by hunger and injury. He revealed its location before dying, of his wounds." Her face showed no judgment for this failing. Hunger and pain could break the strongest spirit. "Greyhawk moved our people to 3 separate locations for safety. I cannot reveal these places to you without his consent." Rebecca nodded her understanding. I carry information vital to their safety, news from Asheville, documents about treaty violations, evidence of corruption in the supply system for Cherokee camps, and observations from inside the marshalling camp where captured Cherokee are held. Morning Light's eyes sharpened with interest. You entered the marshalling camp? Few leave once taken there? I posed as a worker with a legitimate supply delivery, Rebecca explained. What I saw there, she paused, searching for words adequate to describe the suffering she had witnessed. The conditions are deliberately cruel, designed to weaken resistance before the forced march west. But I also connected with allies, a Quaker named Pennington, and a newspaper writer who will publish accounts of these abuses in eastern cities. For the first time, Morning Light's composed expression showed a flicker of hope. Words that reach Washington may not save those already captured, but might help those still free. She studied Rebecca thoughtfully. And you risked much to bring this information back to people not your own by birth. My people by choice, Rebecca corrected gently. My heart walks Cherokee paths now. The elder woman's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners, the barest suggestion of a smile. So I see. She was silent for a moment, apparently reaching a decision. Swift Arrow will take you to Running Creek tomorrow. Grey Hawk has established a temporary council circle there with representatives from several bands, including those from Wolf's Den. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Is Running Wolf among them? The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. Morning Light's expression shifted to one of knowing amusement. The scout moves between all our hidden camps, carrying messages and watching army movements. He was at Running Creek 3 days ago, but left on a scouting mission. Whether he has returned, I cannot say. Heat rose to Rebecca's cheeks, but she offered no explanation for her particular interest in Running Wolf's whereabouts. Morning Light seemed to require none, turning instead to practical matters. You will rest here tonight. Tomorrow's journey is not long but requires caution. Thornton's patrols have increased since Wolf's Den was discovered. She gestured to the young woman who had brought food earlier. Dancing Fawn will show you where to sleep and provide clean garments. Cherokee clothing will attract less attention from sentries than your current attire. Rebecca thanked her, recognizing both the practical wisdom and symbolic acceptance in the offer of Cherokee clothing. Dancing Fawn led her to a small shelter at the edge of the camp, explaining that it had been vacated just that morning when a hunting party departed. Alone for the first time in days, Rebecca finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of exhaustion from her journey. She carefully unpacked her few possessions, including the precious documentation sewn into her settler's dress and Jenkins's detailed map. Tomorrow, she would reach Grey Hawk and deliver everything she had learned. For now, she could only pray it would make a difference in the tribe's desperate struggle to maintain freedom in their ancestral lands. As twilight deepened into night, Rebecca stood at the entrance to her temporary shelter, gazing at stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere under these same stars, Running Wolf might be looking upward, perhaps thinking of her as she thought of him. The vastness of the mountains between them seemed both insurmountable and insignificant compared to the connection she felt. The path finds a way, she whispered to herself, remembering his words from their parting, even through the darkest forest. Dawn broke over Running Creek, painting the sky in delicate shades of pink and gold. Rebecca stood by the water's edge, watching as the first light illuminated the hidden valley that had become the temporary gathering place for Cherokee leaders. After arriving with Swift Arrow yesterday, she had spent hours with Greyhawk and the Council, sharing everything she had learned in Asheville, the conditions at the marshalling camp, the corruption in the supply system, the Quaker allies who would spread word of these abuses in eastern cities, and most urgently, Colonel Thornton's intensified efforts to locate remaining Cherokee hideouts. The Council had listened in grave silence, asking occasional questions, but mostly allowing her to present the full scope of what she had discovered. When she finished, Sarah Two Rivers had embraced her with tears in her eyes, whispering thanks for bringing this crucial information at such personal risk. Now, as a new day began, Rebecca found herself momentarily alone with her thoughts. The weight of responsibility had shifted from her shoulders to the Council's, yet anxiety still gnawed at her. Would Pennington's newspaper articles generate enough outrage to matter? Would the documented evidence of corruption lead to meaningful intervention? And most pressingly, could the scattered Cherokee bands evade Thornton's expanding net-long? Enough for such slow-moving political processes to have any effect? A twig snapped behind her. Rebecca turned, instinctively reaching for Running Wolf's knife before recognizing Stone Bear approaching along the riverbank. The warrior's expression was difficult to read as he stopped several paces away, regarding her with measured assessment. "You return with valuable words," he said finally. It wasn't quite approval, but neither was it the open suspicion he had shown before her journey. "Words alone won't stop rifles," Rebecca replied, echoing his own statement from months ago. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled, a brief expression that transformed his stern features. "Perhaps I was wrong about paper wars." Rebecca raised her eyebrows. This was a significant concession from the warrior who had argued most strongly against her diplomatic mission. "What changed your mind?" Stone Bear gazed across the river, where morning mist still clung to the water. "While you were gone, Running Wolf's ghost strategy succeeded beyond hope. Soldiers desert their posts, claiming to see Cherokee spirits. In the night, officers cannot maintain discipline. Even Colonel Thornton cannot shoot ghosts." His smile returned, this time with a hint of fierce satisfaction. "Your idea," Running Wolf said. White imagination turned against them. Warmth bloomed in Rebecca's chest at this confirmation that her suggestion had been effective. Imagination can be a powerful weapon. "As can truth," Stone Bear acknowledged, glancing at her sideways. "The evidence you gathered may protect more Cherokee than my arrows ever could." He straightened, his warrior's dignity returning. "I misjudged you, stands between. The path you walk serves our people well." Before Rebecca could respond to this unexpected validation, Stone Bear nodded once and continued along the riverbank, leaving her to absorb the significance of their exchange. His acceptance represented a broader shift, recognition that resistance took many forms, and that her unique position between worlds offered strategic advantages rather than divided loyalties. The morning air carried the scent of cooking fires as the camp stirred to life. Children's voices echoed against the valley walls, surprisingly carefree despite the precarious circumstances. Rebecca moved toward the central gathering area, where women prepared the morning meal, offering to help. She was accepted without comment, handed a basket of early spring greens to prepare, a simple domestic task that filled her with unexpected contentment. Sarah Two Rivers joined her, the elder's fingers moving deftly to separate edible shoots from woody stems. "Greyhawk called council leaders to meet again this morning," she said quietly. "Your information changes many plans." "For better or worse?" Rebecca asked. The healer considered this. "Both, perhaps. Knowledge of increased patrols means safer routes must be found for those wishing to avoid capture. But news of your eastern Allies brings hope that some might safely remain if we can maintain hidden camps until pressure from Washington forces negotiations. Rebecca thought of Jenkins's map with its carefully marked safe passages. I have something that might help with finding safer routes. Good, Sarah approved. Bring it to the council meeting. Greyhawk has requested your presence. This was unexpected. Council deliberations were traditionally closed, except to recognized tribal leaders. Are you certain? Sarah's eyes crinkled with amusement. You who have risked everything for our people still question your place among us. She placed a weathered hand over Rebecca's, stilling her work momentarily. The time for such doubts has passed, daughter. Daughter, the simple word carried profound meaning, acknowledging bonds that transcended blood and birth. Rebecca swallowed, against sudden emotion. Thank you. They worked in companionable silence until a young Cherokee man approached, informing them that the council awaited. Rebecca gathered Jenkins's map and followed him to a large shelter situated on a small rise overlooking the creek. Inside, Greyhawk sat with representatives from several Cherokee bands, including Morning Light from the northern camp and other elders Rebecca recognized from Wolf's Den. Stands between, Greyhawk greeted her formally. Join our circle and share what wisdom the Creator has granted you on your journey. Rebecca took the offered place within the circle, conscious of the honor being extended. She produced Jenkins's map, explaining its origins and the valuable information it contained about safe passages through increasingly patrolled territories. The council members leaned forward with interest as she indicated routes marked by the experienced trapper. This northern passage, Morning Light observed, pointing to a winding trail marked on the deerskin, connects to hunting grounds our people have used for generations. Few settlers know of its existence. And here, added an elder Rebecca didn't recognize, these caves could shelter many families if provisions were stored in advance. The discussion continued, strategies forming around the new information. Some bands would move further into the most remote mountain regions, establishing sustainable camps beyond military reach. Others would maintain smaller mobile groups that could evade patrols through constant movement. Most significantly, a network of communication would be established between all bands, ensuring vital information flowed freely despite their dispersion. Throughout the discussion, Rebecca noticed consistent references to seasons to come and winters ahead, clear indications that the Cherokee leaders were planning for extended resistance rather than temporary evasion. This was not merely about surviving until forced removal became inevitable. It was about establishing a permanent, if hidden, presence in their ancestral lands. As the council session concluded, Greyhawk turned to Rebecca. Your journey to Asheville has planted seeds that may yet grow into restoration of our rights. Until then, we ask that you continue to serve as bridge between our world and that of the settlers. There are others like the Quaker Pennington and the Redbirds who might become allies if approached with truth and respect. I will, Rebecca promised, but I have one concern that remains unaddressed. Greyhawk nodded permission to continue. The sacred bundles, she said, recalling the elder's warning at the marshalling camp. I was told Thornton's men specifically search for them, believing they hold power over the Cherokee spirit. A murmur of concern passed through the council. Greyhawk's expression grew grave. This confirms what our scouts have reported. 3 sacred bundles have already been seized from captured families. 2 remain with trusted keepers, constantly, moving to avoid detection. The last... He hesitated, exchanging glances with Sarah 2 Rivers. The last was entrusted to Running Wolf, Sarah explained quietly. He journeys now to a place of ancient power where it will be hidden beyond the soldier's reach. Rebecca absorbed this information with growing unease. If Thornton had specifically targeted the sacred bundles, Running Wolf carried an immensely dangerous responsibility, one that would make him Thornton's prime target if discovered. "When is he expected to return?" she asked, striving to keep her voice neutral despite the worry tightening her chest. "The journey to the sacred mountain takes 7 days," Greyhawk replied. "He departed 4 days past. If all goes well, he will return within the week." The council dispersed shortly afterward, each leader returning to their respective bands with new strategies and renewed purpose. Rebecca found herself drawn back to the river, seeking solitude to process all that had transpired. The knowledge that Running Wolf was engaged in such a perilous mission intensified her longing to see him again, to confirm with her own eyes that he remained safe. The day passed in productive activity, as Rebecca helped prepare medicinal herbs, with Sarah Two Rivers taught a group of children English words that might prove useful in encounters with settlers, and assisted in cataloging supplies that would be distributed among the various bands before they separated again. These ordinary tasks grounded her in the present moment, preventing her mind from dwelling too heavily on concerns she could not address. As evening approached, the camp gathered for a communal meal, a rare opportunity for celebration given their precarious circumstances. Stories were shared, children performed dances they had practiced, and for a few precious hours, the specter of removal receded into the background. Rebecca sat beside Sarah Two Rivers, watching as firelight painted the gathered faces in warm gold. Despite everything, the hardships endured, the dangers still facing them, the uncertain future, there was joy here, and resilience, and an unbreakable spirit that Colonel Thornton, with all his military might, could never truly conquer. "You are smiling," Sarah observed. "Good. Too many shadows have crossed your face since your return." "I was thinking about strength," Rebecca explained. "How it exists in so many forms." Sarah nodded approvingly. "You have learned an important wisdom. The oak that refuses to bend breaks in the storm. The willow that yields survives to grow another season. The Cherokee are willows then. We are both oak and willow," the healer corrected gently. "Strong in our core beliefs, flexible in how we preserve them. This is how we have survived, while other tribes vanished." The celebration continued into the night, stars appearing above the valley in glittering profusion. Eventually, families began retiring to their shelters, the energy gradually diminishing as weariness overcame festivity. Rebecca helped douse the central fires before making her way to the small shelter she had been assigned at the edge of the camp. Sleep proved elusive despite her physical exhaustion. Her mind kept returning to Running Wolf, wondering where he was at that moment, whether he had successfully hidden the sacred bundle, if he traveled safely in the darkness. Eventually, she rose and stepped outside, drawing comfort from the vast starry sky that connected them despite the distance between. 3 more days passed in similar fashion: council meetings, communal work, shared meals. Rebecca gradually settled into the rhythm of camp life, finding purpose in contributing where her skills proved useful. Greyhawk consulted her frequently about settler perspectives and motivations, seeking to understand the forces driving removal policy. Her position as cultural interpreter became increasingly formalized, acknowledged by even the most traditional Cherokee as valuable to their survival. On the 4th morning, Rebecca joined a small gathering of women harvesting early spring mushrooms in the forest near camp. She had learned to identify the edible varieties during her time at Hidden Valley, but still deferred to the more experienced gatherers when uncertainty arose. The peaceful activity, conducted in companionable conversation, provided welcome distraction. From her continuing concern about Running Wolf's absence, the sharp call of a blue jay disrupted their work, then another, and another in rapid succession. The Cherokee women immediately tensed, hands freezing above their gathering baskets. Rebecca recognized the pattern, not natural bird calls, but signals from perimeter scouts. "Someone approaches," whispered an older woman, Rising Moon. "Not soldiers, or the warning would be different." "Friends, then?" Rebecca asked hopefully. Rising Moon shrugged. "Perhaps, or strangers. We must return to camp." They gathered their baskets quickly and moved with practiced stealth through the forest, taking an indirect route that offered concealment if necessary. As they neared the camp, Rebecca heard voices raised in greeting rather than alarm, suggesting the arrivals posed no immediate threat. The scene that greeted them confirmed this assessment. A small group of Cherokee had arrived, 3 warriors escorting several families, including young children who looked exhausted from difficult travel. Camp members were already offering water and food to the newcomers, helping the weakest to comfortable resting places. Rebecca scanned the group automatically, not expecting to recognize anyone. Her heart leaped when she spotted a familiar figure helping an elderly man to a seat by the central fire. Even at a distance, even with his back turned, she would know Running Wolf anywhere. She stood frozen, suddenly uncertain. After imagining this moment for so long, their reunion, all she would say, all she needed to tell him, she found herself unable to move, overwhelmed by emotion she couldn't immediately process. Rising Moon noticed her reaction and smiled knowingly. "The scout returns," she observed, "perhaps with more than the sacred bundle safe in his keeping." Rebecca gathered her courage and moved forward, setting down her basket of mushrooms and making her way through the busy camp. Running Wolf was speaking with Greyhawk, gesturing toward the mountains as he delivered what appeared to be an important report. His buckskin shirt showed signs of hard travel, and a new scar marked his forearm, but otherwise he seemed intact, vital, exactly as she remembered. She waited at a respectful distance, unwilling to interrupt their conversation. Greyhawk noticed her first, a slight smile touching his normally serious expression. He said something to Running Wolf, who turned, immediately his gaze sweeping the gathered people until it found her. For a moment, neither moved. Rebecca saw his eyes widen slightly, disbelief yielding to recognition, and then to something deeper, more profound. The distance between them seemed simultaneously vast and non-existent. Then he was moving toward her, and she toward him, closing the space with steps that started measured but quickened with each moment. They stopped an arm's length apart, the customs of Cherokee propriety briefly containing the emotions evident in both their faces. "You returned," he said simply, his voice low and intent. "As did you," she replied, struggling to keep her own voice steady. His eyes searched hers, seeing beyond words to the journey written in her expression. "You found the Eastern allies, and you protected the sacred bundle." A smile broke across his face, not the restrained expression she had grown accustomed to, but something radiant and unguarded. "We have much to tell each other." Rebecca stands between. "Yes," she agreed, her own smile answering his. "Beginning with this." She closed the remaining distance between them and took his hand in hers, their fingers intertwining with the natural certainty of 2 rivers joining. Around them, the camp continued its activities, accepting this connection as simply another truth made manifest in their community. That evening, as firelight once again illuminated the gathered Cherokee, Rebecca and Running Wolf shared their separate journeys, his to the sacred mountain and back, navigating increasingly dangerous territory, hers to Asheville and through the northern mountains. They spoke of narrow escapes, unexpected allies, and the growing certainty that their resistance, while difficult, was not hopeless. The path ahead remains shadowed, Greyhawk acknowledged when both had finished their accounts. But where once we saw only darkness, now we perceive shapes within it, ways forward that may yet lead to dawn. The gathering nodded in solemn agreement. Rebecca felt Running Wolf's hand find hers again, a silent affirmation of shared purpose and something more personal that grew stronger with each passing moment. Later, as the camp quieted for the night, they walked together along the creek, their conversation flowing as naturally as the water beside them. Running Wolf spoke of his Shawnee mother, who had taught him to navigate between worlds before disease claimed her. Rebecca shared memories of her parents, whom she had rarely discussed since their deaths. "I feared you lost when Wolf's den was discovered," he admitted, as they paused beside a pool where stars reflected in the still water. "I returned to find everyone gone, and signs of soldiers everywhere." "I feared for you as well," she replied. "When morning light told me you carried the sacred bundle to the mountain, knowing Thornton specifically hunted such treasures." He touched the new scar on his arm lightly. "A close encounter. But the bundle is safe now, hidden where no soldier would think to look, protected by guardians older than the Cherokee themselves." Rebecca didn't ask for details, understanding that some knowledge remained sacred, meant only for those designated to carry it. Instead, she told him of Jenkins and his surprising knowledge of Cherokee territories, of the marshalling camp's horrors, of Pennington and Wallace, and their commitment to publicizing Cherokee suffering. As the night deepened around them, their conversation gradually shifted from the political to the personal, from shared purpose to shared future. Running Wolf spoke of cycles and seasons, of patterns that connected all living things, and finally, of two paths that had converged for reasons beyond simple chance. "Among my mother's people," he said, his voice soft in the darkness, "when two souls recognize each other as you and I have done, it is believed they have traveled together before, in lives beyond memory. They are drawn together again to complete unfinished journeys." Rebecca considered this, finding beauty in the concept. "And what would completion look like for us?" "Not an ending," he clarified, "a continuation. Many winters together, perhaps children who will carry both our bloodlines and understand both our worlds. A legacy of balance where others see only division." The simplicity and depth of this vision touched her deeply. "I would welcome such a journey," she said quietly, "however difficult the terrain ahead." Running Wolf reached out, his fingers tracing the curve of her cheek with infinite tenderness. "Then let us begin, as our ancestors did, with words spoken under stars, witnessed by the Creator and all that lives." In the silver light of the waxing moon, they exchanged promises in both Cherokee and English, bridging their dual heritage with vows that required no formal ceremony to bind them. The creek murmured its approval. Night creatures sang harmonies to their pledged future, and somewhere beyond sight, Rebecca felt the presence of all who had guided them to this moment. Her parents, his Shawnee mother, generations of ancestors. From both bloodlines, dawn found them still by the water, watching as first light transformed the valley from shadow to substance. Greyhawk discovered them there as he performed his morning prayers, observing their clasped hands with quiet approval. "The council meets after morning meal," he informed them. "We must finalize plans for our separate journeys before soldiers discover this gathering place." Running Wolf nodded. "We will be there." When the chief had moved on, Rebecca turned to Running Wolf with sudden realization. "We haven't discussed where we will go, which band we will join." He smiled, the expression now familiar, yet still capable of quickening her pulse. "Perhaps neither, perhaps both." At her questioning, "Look," he explained, "my value to our people lies in moving between camps, carrying messages, monitoring soldier movements. Your value lies in maintaining connections with settler allies, translating between worlds. "You suggest we establish our own path," Rebecca said, understanding dawning. "Separate from any single band, but connected to all. With a small cabin, perhaps in territory too remote for soldiers to patrol regularly, a place to return to between journeys." His eyes held a question, seeking her approval of this vision. Rebecca considered the proposal, finding it perfectly aligned with their unique positions within the Cherokee resistance, neither fully immersed in traditional life nor completely detached from it. A third way that honored both their heritages while serving the greater cause. "Yes," she said simply, "our own path." The council meeting that morning confirmed this arrangement, with Greyhawk formally designating them as messengers between the scattered Cherokee bands and their growing network of settler allies. Jenkins' map became the foundation for planning safe routes, with Running Wolf adding details from his extensive knowledge of the territory. In the months and years that followed, Rebecca and Running Wolf fulfilled this role with dedication that became legendary among both Cherokee and sympathetic settlers. Their small cabin, built in a hidden valley, accessible only to those who knew its secret approaches, became a crucial waypoint in an underground network that helped hundreds of Cherokee avoid forced relocation. When Rebecca gave birth to their first child, a daughter they named Morning Star, both Cherokee and settler traditions were honored in her naming ceremony. Sarah Two Rivers traveled for 3 days to attend, bringing gifts and medicines for the new mother and prophecies of the child's future as a bridge builder between peoples. Colonel Thornton never fully succeeded in his mission to remove all Cherokee from their ancestral lands. While thousands were indeed forced westward along the Trail of Tears, hundreds remained hidden in the most remote mountain regions, preserving their culture and traditions despite official claims that no Cherokee remained east of the Mississippi. The newspaper articles published by Wallace, combined with Pennington's tireless advocacy in Washington, eventually led to investigations of corruption in the removal process. Though these came too late to prevent the worst atrocities, they established historical record of injustices that would inform later generations' understanding of this dark chapter. Rebecca and Running Wolf's children grew up in two worlds, learning both Cherokee wisdom and settler knowledge, carrying forward their parents' legacy of cultural interpretation and preservation. Their descendants would later become instrumental in the formal recognition of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, those who had successfully resisted removal and maintained continuous presence in their ancestral homeland. And on autumn evenings, when mist rose from the valleys and stars emerged above the ancient mountains, elders would tell the story of a scout called Running Wolf and a woman called Stands Between, how they found each other against impossible odds, and how their love became a foundation for their people's survival when all paths seemed lost in darkness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.